Chapter 568. The scene before they fainted would probably be unforgettable. The despair under the pressure and the bone-piercing coldness, they had never seen such power before. A true expert. Before even making a move, just his aura alone was unstoppable. Now, everyone finally understood why Nyoye dared to offend the masses and brazenly swindle money in the ghost manner. He indeed had the ability to do so and wasn't afraid of anyone finding him for revenge. Mu Lianqiu stared at the heads on the ground in a daze. She recognized them all as her own people. Sikongju also stared at the 9 heads on the ground silently. 3 of them were his disciples. As the number 2 of the World Commerce Association, when had he ever suffered such humiliation? He clearly knew the murderer was in front of him, but he didn't even dare to mention revenge.
Ah,
that head is Niesheng's? Someone accidentally saw it and let out a cry of surprise. It attracted everyone's attention, and everyone gasped. They finally understood why Sikongju flipped out at Nyoye. His disciples were killed. Could it be Nyoye? Everyone looked at Yu Qianqiu in bewilderment. Everyone, don't look at me. I didn't kill them. Yu Qianqiu looked around and denied it. He coughed and explained, after we were ambushed, we continued on our way. Who knew that we would be ambushed by a group of people? The people who ambushed us this time were extraordinary. One of them actually fought to a draw with me.
Sigh.
Because I was held up by that person, I couldn't help Niesheng and the rest. In the end, I could only watch as they were harmed. Luckily, I used all my strength and managed to snatch back the heads of Niesheng and the rest. How shameful. After speaking, he glanced at the doubtful crowd. As for whether they believed him or not, it wasn't something he had to worry about. The key was to have an explanation so that Sikongju could step down. The scene was silent. Sikongju took a deep breath and said to Mu Lianqiu, keep the head and try to find the mastermind as soon as possible to take revenge for the dead disciple. Mu Lianqiu replied, yes. She picked up the head on the ground and left. I was rude just now. I hope Sir doesn't take offense. Sikongju apologized with a gloomy expression. Although he looked calm on the surface, his heart was bleeding. After all, Niesheng is your disciple. All right, let's not talk about this anymore. Let's get down to business. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand generously. Mister, please come in. Sikongju raised his hand. Yu Qianqiu nodded and followed him into the inner hall. The group of people who were left behind looked at each other in dismay, and then hurriedly left. They had to inform the sect of what happened here in time. Baiwan Nation's capital, Orchid City, Greenhouse Restaurant. On the 2nd floor, Yu Qianqiu stood by the window of the bustling street with his hands behind his back, looking at the bustling crowd on the street. Guan Zhongkai and Yu Lan accompanied him carefully, not daring to disturb him. The Green Mansion restaurant was known as the best restaurant in Orchid City. A private room by the window like this one would be hard to find if one didn't make a reservation in advance. Guan Zhongkai had even asked the steward of the World Chamber of Commerce's Lan City branch to make a reservation in advance. The trio's destination for this trip was the World Chamber of Commerce's headquarters, Cornucopia. However, when they passed by Baiwan Nation, Yu Qianqiu strongly requested to take a look there. Guan Zhongkai had seen his means, and in addition to the things that happened in the Gold Casting City branch, even his master suffered a loss. How could he dare to disobey him and could only accompany him? Actually, Guan Zhongkai had to thank Yu Qianqiu for being able to regain his freedom so quickly this time. Sikongju was originally prepared to personally accompany Yu Qianqiu, but after those things happened, how could he be in the mood to accompany him? It was useless to accompany him. With the other party's cultivation, if he wanted to run away, there was no way to stop him. It all depended on whether the other party was aware of it or not. Sikongju also didn't want to be angered by Yu Qianqiu again, so he found an excuse to rush back to the headquarters in advance and arranged for Mu Lianqiu to accompany him. However, Yu Qianqiu specifically picked Guan Zhongkai, saying that he liked Guan Zhongkai's character. He was forthright and didn't get along with others. Sikongju was forced into a corner and could only restore Guan Zhongkai's freedom. However, He was more or less on guard and couldn't help but tell his eldest disciple, Guan Zhongkai, to be careful. When Yu Qianzhou and Guan Zhongkai were about to leave the gold casting city branch, Yulan came to look for Guan Zhongkai. Yu Qianzhou's eyes immediately lit up. He didn't expect that these two old enemies would be together. He immediately put on the airs of a senior and asked Yulan if she was willing to accompany him. Nyoyud had caused such a huge commotion in the gold casting city branch, and news of it had already spread throughout the cultivation world. Yulan had looked for Guan Zhongkai under orders to find out news of Nyoyud. He didn't expect to receive an invitation from Nyoyud, so he immediately asked his master. In the end, it attracted the attention of his master. Not only did they want him to accompany Nyoyud, but they also gave him some secret missions. It was because of this that the scene of the three of them at the Green Manor restaurant happened. They had just arrived. These flies are really annoying. I can't even finish swatting them. Yu Qianzhou looked downstairs and snorted coldly. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other and looked out of the window. They saw two people sitting at the liangpi stall opposite them, eating. They would occasionally look in their direction, but when they saw that the person upstairs was staring at them, they lowered their heads and continued eating. Two early-stage tribulation transcending cultivators. I'll go deal with them so that they don't disturb Senior's mood. Guan Zhongkai turned and went downstairs. He was already somewhat used to it. Along the way, there were too many people following them. When he and Yulan discovered them, they only gave them a warning. Who knew that Yu Qianzhou would force the two of them to kill them? As long as there was an opportunity to kill them, he wouldn't let them go. These people following them were naturally sent by various factions. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan were a little apprehensive when they wanted to kill them. Who knew that when Yu Qianzhou saw the two of them hesitating, he bluntly said, "If you don't kill them, I'll kill you. Do as you see fit." Only then did the two of them remember that this smiling guy had a nickname, Ruthless Judge. They were quite frightened by his words and had no choice but to do as he said. Yulan was even more bitter after the incident. Why did they get on this pirate ship? Even if they got off the ship, they would still offend people from various countries with this massacre. What would they do in the future? Nonsense. Is this the place to make a move? Yu Qianzhou coldly snorted. There will be plenty of opportunities. Let's talk about it after we leave Lan City. Hearing this, Guan Zhongkai obediently walked back and repeatedly admitted his mistake. Senior, please don't blame me. I didn't think it through. Huh? Yu Qianzhou was slightly surprised. He squinted his eyes and looked down. A few people walking over from the side of the street attracted his attention. They were all old acquaintances. The elegant Yan Juixing and a young master in snow-white clothes holding a white fan were walking side by side in front. From time to time, they would stop at various stalls. Man Hu and his martial brothers were behind them. At the very back, there were 4 plain-clothed guards holding sabers. The young master in white was none other than the princess of Baiwan Kingdom, Hipster, who was disguised as a man in Deyang City. Why are these guys here too? Why are they together? Yu Qianzhou muttered to himself. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan, who were on both sides of the window, noticed Yu Qianzhou's abnormality. They both stuck their heads out. The two of them weren't familiar with Yan Juixing and Hipster, but they knew Man Hu and his martial brothers. With their eyesight, they could naturally tell that the young master in white was a fake at first glance. The two of them also felt a little strange. They didn't know where this man and woman came from. They could actually make the disciple of Great Snow Mountain's Bing Qingzi be their follower. What made the two of them most curious was that Nyoyud's reaction seemed to know these people. The two of them were puzzled. Guan Zhongkai asked tentatively, "Senior, do you know them?" Yu Qianzhou shook his head slightly and said, "I just feel that the combination of these people is a little strange. The 4 people in the middle are obviously at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage, but why do they seem to be the followers of the 2 people in front? Could it be that there are as many people at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage now? An ordinary person can casually grab a few of them to be his bodyguards?" His explanation was reasonable. Anyone who knew the ropes would find it a little strange. The two of them immediately had their doubts cleared. At the same time, they couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. A spirit-severing expert was indeed powerful. He could easily see through the cultivation of the 4 people at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. Little did they know that it would be strange if Yu Qianqiu could see through it. It was just that when he was in the Chinese cultivation world, he already knew that man Hu and his martial brothers were at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. Guan Zhongkai said with a flattering tone, "Although I don't know the 2 people in front, I know the 4 cultivators at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. Do you want me to call them up and ask them?" "Forget it." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand disapprovingly and said, "It's just 4 cultivators at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. It's not worth worrying about." Guan Zhongkai, who was also at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage, froze and shut up immediately. Under the gazes of the 3 people, they found that this group of people had also broken into the Green Mansion restaurant. After Wen Lanfeng suppressed the 6 experts at the final stage of the spirit-severing stage, his words of support for Yu Qianqiu made Yan Juixing ponder for a long time. He couldn't figure out when Yu Qianqiu was related to Wen Lanfeng. As for what Wen Lanfeng said about admiring Yu Qianqiu's talent, he didn't believe it. Nobody would believe it, let alone him. They all guessed that there was some relationship between the 2 of them. Or, when Lanfeng wanted to monopolize the treasure left by the demon monarch of swords in the mist forest, so he used the 6 experts to show off. After the battle that shocked the cultivation world, Bing Qingzi finally told Yan Juixing about the secret of the demonic book. Yan Juixing also finally understood why this master and disciple would do their best to help him. Later, Bing Qingzi invited Yan Juixing to Dirong Nation, but he refused. The hero, in Yu Qianqiu's hands, could cause chaos in various countries. The amazing strength it showed made him covet it. He believed that with the information he had, he was confident that he could take Yu Qianqiu's hidden strength under his command. He always felt that it was a wonderful feeling to meet Yu Qianqiu in Baiwan Nation, as if it was a kind of fate that he couldn't explain. Therefore, he decided to wait in Baiwan Nation. If his feeling was wrong and he couldn't meet Yu Qianqiu, he would go to the World Chamber of Commerce before the cornucopia to see the famous event in the cultivation world. Chapter 569. Seeing that Yan Juixing insisted on staying, Bing Qingzi didn't insist. He just told Man Hu and the others to protect him. He also left 3 jade pendants for Yan Juixing so that he could summon Yan Juixing for help when he encountered a threat that he couldn't resolve. After seeing Bing Qingzi off, Yan Juixing's confidence was greatly boosted. In the past, he was worried that the master and disciple were using him, so he had some scruples in his heart. He didn't expect that there was such a hidden story. He was actually the only successor of ancient diabolism in the human world, and he shouldered the heavy responsibility of reviving diabolism. During the time he wandered around Lan City, he met a domineering child with Man Hu and the others by chance, and they had some small conflicts. This child was obviously a fake, but he thought that others couldn't see through him. He wanted to beat him up, but he didn't expect that the cuffs of this fake were embroidered with the symbol of Baiwan country's royal family, which was a thumb-size, lifelike dark green orchid. With the experience of Man Hu and the others, it wasn't difficult to guess the identity of this fake. Moreover, she was followed by 4 guards, who couldn't be compared to the guards of ordinary rich families, so her identity was obvious. Yan Juixing was quite interested in the Wen clan, so he made some effort to make friends with a hipster. As for what he wanted to do, only Yan Juixing himself knew. Today, the 2 of them made an appointment to have fun again. The hipster was good at playing, and they almost visited half of Lan City. After playing for half a day, the hipster finally felt a little tired. Coincidentally, the best restaurant in Lan City was nearby, so she excitedly pulled Yan Juixing and the others into the restaurant. Yan Juixing was a little surprised when he walked in. He looked around and didn't expect to see such an elegant and quiet restaurant in this busy city. The 100 Flowers House in the 100 Flowers Valley was a famous restaurant in the cultivation world of China, but he didn't know when he would see it again, which made him feel a little emotional. Hipster had already slammed the counter with a pung-pung sound. "Shopkeeper, I want the best private room." He really did sound like a boorish and forthright man, but his voice seemed a little too weak. The manager, who was smiling at her, was slightly stunned. He also realized that the hipster was a woman dressed as a man. He didn't expose her, but squeezed out a smile and said, "Sir, you really came at a bad time. The best private room is already occupied. Do you want me to check if there are any other seats?" Wen Qing's pretty face tightened. She was a descendant of the heavens, and when she lost her temper, even the current emperor had to listen to her. When had she ever done something like taking a step back? A small restaurant actually dared to reject her request. Just as she was about to fly into a rage, she turned her head to look at the elegant Yan Juexing. In order not to ruin her image, she forcefully suppressed her rage. He left the counter and waved the fan in his hand. The guards at the back understood. One of them stepped forward and secretly took out a golden token. He waved it at the manager and said in a deep voice, "Manager, please ask the guests in the private room to move aside. We will compensate them double for their losses." When the shopkeeper saw the golden token, his expression changed. This was not the first time he had encountered something like this. He was experienced and knowledgeable, so he could tell at a glance that it was a token from the imperial palace. The guest in front of him was actually a distinguished guest from the imperial palace. As a merchant, how could he dare to offend the nobles in the palace? He nodded repeatedly and bowed. "I have eyes but failed to see. I'll go ask the guests in the box to give up their seats." Wait a minute. Wait a minute. After saying that, he immediately ran upstairs. "Brother Yan, I'm really sorry for spoiling your mood." Wen Qing held a fan and apologized to Yan Juexing. Looking at her appearance, she seemed to care about Yan Juexing's feelings. Yan Juexing smiled gently and said, "It's all right." Man Hu and his brothers looked at each other and smiled, not saying a word. Some things were just so coincidental. The people in the so-called best private room were none other than Yu Qianqiu and the other two. Just as the dishes were being served, the shopkeeper walked in with a smile and waved away the waiters who were serving the dishes. He cupped his hands at them and said, "Distinguished guests, I'm really sorry. I might have to trouble you to change your seats." "Change seats?" Guan Zhongkai was startled and said, "What do you mean?" He didn't understand at once. Looking out the window, Yu Qianqiu had some guesses in his heart. The princess of Baiwan country had arrived, and this was the best private room in the green residence. "I'm afraid it's related to that girl." The shopkeeper smiled bitterly and said, "I hope the distinguished guests can understand. It's really because a few distinguished guests from the palace have come and specifically asked for this private room. I have no choice but to do this. But don't worry, after changing seats, we won't charge a single cent for all expenses. It's all free." He also knew that customers who could afford to eat in such a high-class place wouldn't care about that little bit of money. What they ate was their mood. He could only bring up the distinguished guests from the palace and hope that they would back off in the face of difficulties, so as to avoid any unpleasantness. It's business. It's better to avoid trouble. Harmony makes money. Yu Qianqiu sneered in his heart. As expected, it's related to that girl. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan's expressions changed at the same time. This was too much of a slap in the face. With their status in the cultivation world, it was the first time that they were forced to give up their seats for a meal in the secular world. However, Wen Lanfeng was quite powerful in the cultivation world today. Even the secular mortals of the Wen family enjoyed the protection of Wen Lanfeng, so they couldn't casually provoke him. If it were any other time, they would endure it and get over it. But today, it wasn't just them, there was also Niu Yud here. It was really a dilemma for the two of them. The shopkeeper saw that the two of them didn't look too good and knew that it wasn't good for the guests to say something like lowering their heads, so he comforted them with kind words. "Hey, we can't afford to offend the emperor. Everyone, don't take it to heart. I'll arrange a better place for you." Just as he was about to turn around, he heard someone say, "People from the palace? Is it someone from the Wen family?" The shopkeeper turned around and saw that it was the person who had his back to him and was looking out the window. Looking at the situation in the room, this person was the one who could call the shots. He immediately replied, "It should be someone from the royal Wen family. The guard is holding a token from the palace." Go tell them that even if the Emperor of the Wen family comes, he won't dare to disturb me. Tell them to wait on the side and don't look for trouble, Yu Qianqiu said indifferently. Others might be afraid of Wen Lanfeng, but he really wasn't. Ah! The shopkeeper was surprised. Someone actually dared to say such treasonous words in the capital of Baiwan Nation. If they weren't crazy, then they had a powerful background. But looking at these people, they clearly weren't crazy. Could there be someone more powerful than the emperor? This. The shopkeeper didn't know what to say. He had never seen someone who didn't even give face to the royal family. Seeing that Niu Yud had stood up for them, Guan Zhongkai and Yulan had nothing else to say. The latter said in a deep voice, "Hurry up and go." The shopkeeper suddenly felt his scalp go numb. He felt that he was in big trouble today. Neither side was easy to deal with. After responding, he didn't even know how he went downstairs. When he saw the people downstairs, he thought that he definitely couldn't afford to offend the royal family, so he simply pushed the responsibility away and said to the guard with a bitter face, "I told the guests upstairs your identity, but they still refused to give up their seats." Yan Juexing, Man Hu, and the others looked at each other and felt a little strange. There were mortals in the secular world who dared to not give face to the royal family? Could it be people from the cultivation world? Wen Qing's pretty face turned cold and said, "There's such a thing? Which family is so arrogant? Go. Throw them out for me." The princess's temper completely exploded. 2 guards immediately rushed upstairs, but after a while, they didn't even hear the sound of fighting. They saw 2 people directly thrown down from upstairs, knocking over 2 tables in the lobby. They lay on the ground motionless, and no one knew whether they were dead or alive. They had already made their move. Without waiting for the scholar, whose face had turned green, to say anything else, the other 2 guards pulled out their sabers with a schwa sound. They bent their knees and jumped straight up to the 2nd floor. Who knew that in the blink of an eye, the 2 guards would be thrown down the stairs along with their swords. The guests who were able to eat in this kind of place were people who were used to seeing scenes. They didn't panic when they saw people fighting. Instead, they surrounded with interest to watch the show. The shopkeeper secretly gave a glance to a waiter. The waiter understood and ran to report to the authorities. "Rebel, rebel," Wen Qing's sharp voice roared. "Brother Wen, don't be anxious." Yan Juexing smiled and patted Wen Qing's shoulder. Wen Qing's body trembled and his cheeks turned crimson. As expected, he didn't roar anymore. Yan Juexing looked at Man Hu. The latter nodded and lightly jumped up. As if he was taking a stroll in the courtyard, he landed on the 2nd floor and pushed open the door that had already thrown out the 4 guards. Man Hu's elegant movements immediately won the applause of the entire hall. It was obvious that he was much more skilled than the 4 guards. Many people praised good martial arts. Wen Qing's eyes were shining as he looked at Yan Juexing. He didn't expect Yan Juexing to have such an expert by his side. He was even better than the imperial guards. He didn't know where Yan Juexing came from. Everyone stared at the door upstairs. This time, they didn't see any movement like the previous 2 times. After waiting for a while, they saw a man who opened the door and come out. He turned around and bowed to the inside. Then he gently closed the door. The group of people who were watching the show suddenly felt bored. They thought they could see a big show. Who knew that it was a good-looking but useless pushover who actually went up and bowed to them. Yan Juexing and the others were surprised. Who exactly was upstairs? How could Man Hu be so respectful to them? The innkeeper's mouth opened. It seemed that the person inside wasn't simple. He could actually make the imperial guards bow to him. What was his background? Man Hu jumped down and shouted to the innkeeper. "Innkeeper, quickly serve the guests upstairs." Then he walked to the side of the few people and said, "It's Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Du." The 3 juniors looked at each other in confusion. Old 7 frowned and said, "Isn't it Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Du? Does eldest senior brother need to give them face?" Only Yan Juexing did not recognize any of them. Wen Chongzhen was obviously a regular here, and the shopkeeper also knew him. He immediately ran over with a bitter face and saluted. "Little prince, you're here. That box has already been occupied, He couldn't finish his sentence.
He was depressed.
Why were all the people who came today so tough? What should he do? The people in the box even dared to attack the people from the palace. He really didn't know if they would give face to the little prince. When Chongzheng was about to get angry, but he found Hipster staring at him. They were stunned at the same time and almost said in unison, "Why are you here?" When Man Hu and his brother saw Nongzhu, they were even more stunned. Why did Mr. Nongzhu, who was famous in the cultivation world, come here? Nongzhu also looked at these guys with a tired face. When Hipster saw Nongzhu walking leisurely behind Wen Chongzheng, her face suddenly changed. She hurriedly bowed and saluted. Hipster greets Mr. Nongzhu. She was frightened by the fake Nongzhu that Yu Qianqiu had impersonated. Although the real Nongzhu did not do anything to her, after she returned, her father, the emperor, was still furious because of that matter. If Wen Bai hadn't pleaded for her, she would have been beaten to death by her father. She had never seen her father so angry with her. It was very scary. After being severely punished, she was grounded for a month. She finally understood what her uncle Wen Yuan said to her in Daong City. If you offend Mr. Nongzhu, even your father can't protect you. Hearing Hipster's words, Yan Zhuixing was stunned. He didn't expect that this person was Mr. Nongzhu, the owner of the purple bamboo forest in the South Sea. His eyes flashed. No wonder, he was the most handsome man in the cultivation world, Mr. Nongzhu. His style was unparalleled. Man Hu and the others were also stunned. They didn't expect this woman to know Mr. Nongzhu. Although they were a little unhappy because they had been defeated by Nongzhu's disciple, Ze, they didn't dare to be disrespectful. After all, Nongzhu's cultivation was obvious. They immediately went over and saluted. Greetings, Mr. Nongzhu. Yan Zhuixing naturally followed. You little guys, why are you here? You're welcome. Nongzhu waved his hand casually. He was naturally qualified to call Man Hu and the others little guys. When the shopkeeper heard Hipster refer to herself as Hipster, he was startled. It turned out that this woman who came from the palace dressed as a man was actually the current princess. Who was this Mr. Nongzhu? Even the princess had to salute him. After knowing the identity of Hipster, he immediately knelt down and kowtowed. Greetings, Your Highness. The group of onlookers also understood that it was the princess. So the people kneeling on the ground greeted the princess. When Chongzheng, who was standing aside, was suddenly in high spirits. It couldn't be better to meet the princess here. Once the princess brought the news that he was with Mr. Nongzhu back to the palace, it would definitely cause a great uproar. Even if he had nothing to do with Mr. Nongzhu, who would dare to look down on him. Just as he was holding back his excitement, he suddenly saw Mr. Nongzhu frowning at the people kneeling on the ground. He immediately woke up and hurriedly shouted to the shopkeeper, "Shopkeeper, clear these people out of here immediately." Hipster also noticed Nongzhu's reaction. He immediately raised his hand to the crowd and said, "No need to be so polite. Get up." The group of people thanked the princess and got up. They saw the shopkeeper leading a group of waiters to get rid of the crowd. They didn't even take the money, but just urged the crowd to leave. Some people were not happy at first. But when they thought that the princess was here and the little prince was here, no one dared to disturb them. They left immediately. This was the difference between the common people and the nobles. Obviously, Nongzhu didn't expect that eating would make such a big noise. His face was slowly showing his unhappiness. When Chongzheng was shocked, he shouted to the shopkeeper again, "Shopkeeper, have you cleared the box I asked for? Take us there quickly." The shopkeeper was about to cry. The people upstairs even dared to beat the princess's people. He didn't dare to offend them. He had to bow to Hipster for help. "Your Highness, please say something." Hipster glanced at Nongzhu. Her eyes suddenly lit up. Even the emperor was afraid of this person. He must be able to deal with the people upstairs. Thus, he pulled on Wen Chongzheng's sleeve and obediently complained, "Brother Wang, the best private room has already been occupied by someone, and they even beat at my guards."
Look.
He looked at the lobby where Hipster was pointing. He didn't notice it if he didn't look carefully. There were 4 people lying on the ground. He didn't know whether they were alive or dead. Who had eaten leopard's gall to actually dare to hit the imperial guards? When Chongzheng was about to get angry, but he felt that something was wrong. His sister was an unruly princess. Would it be a good thing if she was bullied? How could she stand there without any reaction and complain to him?
Ghost.
When Chongzheng looked at Nongzhu also felt a little strange. Someone dared to bully the princess in the capital. This was Wen Lanfeng's territory. Even ordinary cultivators wouldn't dare to do this. She looked at Man Hu and asked, Man Hu, what's going on? Who's in the box upstairs? Is it the ice old man in your house? That's not right. Didn't he go back to the Great Snow Mountain? He was sure that Man Hu and the others already knew who the person upstairs was. Since they could mix with the princess, they were Bing Qingzi's disciples. Their guts weren't small. They couldn't watch the princess being bullied. Now they all stood there indifferently. Obviously, they had met a tough guy. Man Hu paused and cupped his fists. It's Guan Zhongkai and Yulan. They're accompanying Senior Niu inside. Nongzhu said suspiciously. Senior Niu? Is Niu yet upstairs? She had heard from Wen Lanfeng that Guan Zhongkai and Yulan had accompanied Niu Yud to the World Chamber of Commerce. After all, this matter was now known by everyone in the cultivation world. Naturally, she guessed it was Niu Yud. It's Senior Niu Yud, Man Hu replied. Hipster, Wen Chongzheng, and the shopkeeper had never heard of these names. They didn't know where these big shots came from. They were all confused. However, Nongzhu's eyes lit up. She wanted to meet this mysterious Niu Yud to see who he was. He actually dared to make such a big move in the cultivation world. He was really bold. She didn't expect to meet him here. She turned to look at Wen Chongzheng and found that although this guy liked to flatter, he was still a good person. Speaking of which, she had to thank this guy. Otherwise, she would have to go to the World Chamber of Commerce if she wanted to see the mysterious Niu Yud again. She laughed and said, Niu Yud is here? I'd like to go up and see. Sir, do you want me to go up with you? Wen Chongzheng nodded and bowed. Nongzhu's admiring look just now made him feel as if he was injected with chicken blood. He was suddenly in high spirits. Seeing Nongzhu waving her hand, he quickly and obediently retreated to the side. At this moment, there was a sudden sound of orderly running outside. From the sound, there were probably dozens of people. Then someone shouted, Surround this place. Don't let the beating bandits escape. It turned out that after the shop assistant reported the case, the arresting officers had arrived. Nongzhu looked back and frowned. She pointed at Wen Chongzheng and said, Boy, let the officers outside guard the door and don't let anyone in to disturb us. If you mess up, you'll be in trouble. Yes, yes, yes. Wen Chongzheng nodded repeatedly. He thought it was Nongzhu's honor to do this, so he ran out eagerly. With his identity as a young prince and the princess inside, it was naturally easy to settle this matter. Nongzhu was neither too fast nor too slow. She slowly walked up the stairs with her hands behind her back. Chapter 571. Nongzhu from the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest is here to pay a visit. Nongzhu stood in front of the door and introduced herself. She didn't care if the people inside agreed or not. She pushed the door open and went in. As soon as she went in, Guan Zhongkai and Yulan both bowed and said, Nice to meet you, Mr. Nongzhu. Nongzhu waved her hand, and her eyes fell on the back of the figure at the window. This figure was so familiar, and that arrogant posture, she had seen it more than once or twice.
It was exactly the same as someone.
Nongzhu's face gradually darkened, and she said in a low voice, Get out of here, both of you. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other.
They knew she was talking about them.
The strange thing was that Nongzhu was polite just now. Why did she turn hostile in the blink of an eye? But from what she said, Nongzhu seemed to know Niu Yud. They didn't go out immediately. Instead, they looked at Niu Yud. To them, Niu Yud was much scarier than Nongzhu. Yu Qianqiu looked out of the window and couldn't help smiling bitterly. Was there a need to say it? Nongzhu obviously recognized him at a glance. It was not easy to hide one's identity in front of familiar people. You go out first. I have something to say to Mr. Nongzhu. Yu Qianqiu said calmly. Yes. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan retreated respectfully, closing the door behind them. Nongju's face twitched. What was going on? Yin Baikong's disciple and Shangguan Taiping's disciple were so obedient to Yu Qianzhou. Nongju was speechless when she thought of the three enemies fighting in Daong Kingdom. This guy really knew how to torment people. After setting up a sound barrier in the room, Nongju sat in front of the table and said coldly, I was wondering where Niu Yud came from. So it's you. Should I call you Niu Yud or Yu Qianzhou? In fact, he had long suspected that Niu Yud was Yu Qianzhou. It was just that the rumor that Niu Yud was a soul formation expert made him unconvinced. This time, in addition to the commotion that Niu Yud had caused in the Gold Casting City branch, the eerie aura that threatened Sikongju made Nongju even more suspicious that he was Yu Qianzhou. Others might not know, but he had experienced it before. He was one of the few people who knew about Yu Qianzhou's netherworld ghost flame. Now that he saw Niu Yud in person, he had even less doubts. Who else could it be but that kid? But then again, if Niu Yud's deeds were not so similar to the Yu Qianzhou that Nongju knew, even if she saw Niu Yud, she would not be able to insist that he was Yu Qianzhou. After all, there were many people with similar figures in this world. Who dare to say that people with similar figures must be the same person? It was unreasonable. Yu Qianzhou looked around outside the window and closed it. He turned around and bowed. Senior Nongju, long time no see. I missed you so much. As he spoke, he fiddled with the dishes on the table and filled the empty cup in front of Nongju with wine. Come on, you missed me? Nongju sneered. I'm afraid you can't wait for me to scram as far away as possible. Yu Qianzhou chuckled, not minding it. The two of them bickering would not hurt their relationship. He had to be thick-skinned to deal with this old fox, or else he would be the one to suffer. After downing a cup of wine, he sat opposite Nongju and asked, Is Fu Rong still on Shantian Island? How is she now? Is she not used to it? When he mentioned Fu Rong, Nongju thought of Zi and felt flustered. She replied indifferently, Your master treats her much better than you. He personally gave her a middle-grade spiritual treasure and has approved her to live on Shantian Island. With the protection of the world's #1 master, who can live a better life than her? Yu Qianzhou was slightly stunned. Why did he hear a hint of jealousy in Nongju's words? He did not care about Nongju's feelings. He patted his chest carefully and breathed a sigh of relief. That's good. That's good. I was worried that my master would be unhappy and would not allow Fu Rong to live on Shantian Island. As he spoke, he stood up again and walked to Nongju, making a deep bow. He said with unprecedented sincerity to Nongju, Senior, thank you for taking care of Fu Rong for me. Yu Qianzhou, will remember this favor and will definitely repay it in the future. Nongju was stunned. She had never seen this guy so sincere to her. Just because of that silly girl? What's so good about that silly girl? How can she be better than my Zi? He swallowed his saliva with difficulty and asked disapprovingly, Look at how serious you are. Is hibiscus really that good? Why can't I see it? Tell me, what's so good about that silly girl? There was no need to mention how depressed he was in his heart. No matter if it was in terms of appearance or anything else, his daughter Zi was clearly superior to Farong. But it was strange that this guy, who was obviously not a good person, was so concerned about that girl and took care of her. What made him even more puzzled was that even Bai Changchun had taken a liking to that silly girl. Yu Qianzhou shook his head contentedly. There's nothing good or bad about it. Like you said, she's just a silly girl. She's so silly that no matter what I do, she's willing to follow me. This is enough for me to cherish her. There's no other reason. Nongju was speechless, but she looked at Yu Qianzhou thoughtfully. Hey, did you say that my master gave Fu Rong a middle-grade spiritual treasure? Yu Qianzhou finally realized that he had forgotten this because he was thinking about Fu Rong. He remembered that when he asked his master for it, his master said that he didn't have it. Based on his master's character, he wouldn't lie to him. Alas. Nongju sighed. Nanming failed to refine an upper-grade spiritual treasure, so he settled for the second best and made it a middle-grade spiritual treasure. Your master has no use for it, so he gave it to Fu Rong. Alas. With Old Bai's cultivation, it's not a good thing to go to the East Holy Land without a suitable weapon. Failed? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Then he patted his forehead and said as if he thought of something, I have a few good things here, but I don't know if my master can use them. Then he took out a sword from his storage bag and handed it to Nongzhu. Senior, please show it to my master and see if he can use it. Nongzhu looked at Yu Qianqiu in confusion. After taking the sword, her eyes suddenly lit up and she couldn't help but exclaim. She stood up and stroked the sword. The sword was cold to the touch, and there were undecipherable ancient patterns on it. The whole sword didn't look luxurious, and it looked very low-key and old. But with Nongzhu's cultivation, she immediately felt that there was a huge momentum inside it. Once it was activated, it would be invincible.
Good sword.
Nongzhu couldn't help but praise it. She held it in her hand and shook it. She wanted to test its power, but found that she couldn't control it. When she injected her divine sense into it to check, she couldn't help but gasp, what a powerful remnant divine sense. It can actually resist the invasion of my divine sense. I can't even expel it with my cultivation. Then she suddenly raised her head and stared at Yu Qianqiu with a solemn face. She asked, this sword is definitely comparable to a top-grade spiritual treasure. Brat, tell me honestly, whose sword is this? Yu Qianqiu patted his chest and said, of course it's my sword. If it's not mine, how can I give it to my master?
Don't talk nonsense with me.
A cold light flashed across Nongzhu's hand and rested on Yu Qianqiu's neck. She narrowed her eyes and said threateningly, this sword obviously has an owner, but its spiritual mind has been damaged, which means that the original owner of this sword is no longer in this world. Even so, such a powerful remnant divine sense is definitely not something you can have. I didn't expect that there was someone with such a high cultivation in this world. Tell me honestly, whose sword is this? Before Yu Qianqiu could answer, Nongzhu suddenly understood and said, I see. You pretended to be me, and now you pretended to be Niu Yud. I guess the original owner of this sword is a person named Niu Yud.
Yu Qianqiu was stunned.
He thought that this guy's imagination was too rich. Seeing that there was no way to deny it, he honestly pointed to the sky. What do you mean? Nongzhu asked suspiciously. Alas. I'm afraid you won't believe me even if I tell you. Yu Qianqiu gently pushed away the sword on his neck and said with a wry smile, I got this sword in the mist forest. It belongs to an immortal in the immortal world. Can you believe it? Mist forest? Nongzhu suddenly became energetic and said excitedly, yes. I heard that you were able to break into the mist forest. Your master even asked me to ask you what's going on. Tell me quickly, what's the matter with the treasure left by the Demon of Swords? He casually pulled a chair and sat down. My master asked you to ask this? Yu Qianqiu scratched his head awkwardly. He knew that no matter how ridiculous Nongzhu was, she would never use his master, Bai Changchun, to talk nonsense. It was most likely that his master really asked him to ask. Generally speaking, although Nongzhu was not a good person, she was still trustworthy when it came to serious matters. But the key point was that he made up the name of the Demon of Swords. An honest person like him could not possibly admit that he was lying. After thinking for a while, he felt that it was not a big deal. He only said that because he was forced to fight back. He did not do anything wrong. Hence, from the moment he was hunted down to the moment he charged into the misty forest, he recounted everything he had seen and heard. However, he still concealed the fact that he had the golden bead to detoxify the poison. It was the only thing that could save his life. As a person drifting in the world, he had to leave a way to protect himself. Yu Qianqiu described the process of being chased as extremely miserable. It was simply a path of blood and tears. It was as pitiful as one could imagine. In the end, he was forced into a dead end and risked his life to break into the horrifying mist forest. Nongzhu was sometimes moved, and sometimes her eyes were filled with murderous intent. Just imagine, if he was not forced into a dead end, who would dare to take the risk of breaking into the mist forest? Nongzhu snorted coldly and said, for the sake of 2 imaginary treasured sabers, The countries actually did such a thing. They are really obsessed. She pointed at Yu Qianqiu and scolded. You're a pig. You've already been forced into such a situation. Why don't you use your master? Isn't Old Man Bai's name used to scare people? Let's see who dares to touch you. Chapter 572. Motherf asterisk Ker. You make it sound good. You know I'm Bai Changchun's disciple. When have I ever scared you? Yu Qianqiu cursed silently. But he said proudly, they're just a bunch of scums. There's no need to bring up my master. Nomju couldn't help looking at his arrogance. She thought to herself, like master, like disciple. Although this kid's character is not good, he is similar to Bai Changchun in some ways. No wonder old Bai accepted him as his disciple. When she heard Yu Qianqiu say that he killed more than 2,000 cultivators without even blinking, Nomju was even more shocked. Nomju secretly clicked her tongue. Old Bai was indeed cruel and merciless. Nomju was dumbfounded and shook her head in disbelief. The legendary Immortal Ascension stage is in the Mist Forest. Unbelievable. So the colorful fog is called the soul-transforming smoke. Even an immortal can't resist it. It's really vicious. By the way, why aren't you afraid of the soul-transforming smoke? Who knows? If you ask me, who should I ask? Yu Qianqiu picked up his chopsticks and ate happily. With food in his mouth, he stammered, I guess it has something to do with the skill I'm practicing. My master said that the skill I'm practicing is the most sacred skill between heaven and earth. It's just the soul-transforming smoke. The most sacred skill between heaven and earth? Nomju's face was full of envy. She carried the sword on her shoulder and said patiently, Yu Qianqiu, what's the name of your skill? Can you show me your incantation? You can ask my master. I can't make the decision. Yu Qianqiu smoothly mentioned Bai Changchun. Nomju was speechless. However, her eyes were fixed on the fine steel bracelet on Yu Qianqiu's left wrist. Yu Qianqiu threw the sword into his storage bag. His body flashed. Before he knew what was going on, he found that the bracelet on his wrist was gone. He immediately roared, Nomju, what are you doing? Give it back to me. Nomju turned a deaf ear to him. She took the bracelet and injected her divine sense into it to check it. Then she clicked her tongue and said, You are so lucky. There are treasures everywhere. Oh my God. A storage bracelet used by an immortal. This was probably the only one in the world. Good stuff. Good stuff. By the way, what about the things inside? Where did you hide it? Take it out for me to see. Yu Qianqiu smashed the chopsticks in his hand on the table and snorted. Show you? If you snatch it away, who am I going to ask for it? What are you talking about? Am I that kind of person? Take it out and let me have a look. I've seen a lot of things in my life. I'm just short of immortals. Nomju winked at him. However, his eyes were darting around Yu Qianqiu's body, as if he was looking for a place to hide something. Recalling the scene of Yu Qianqiu taking out the sword from the storage bag, he dashed over without hesitation and grabbed the storage bag. However, after shaking it out for a long time, there were only a few spiritual stones. Nomju was stunned. Don't tell me you've hidden a few more storage bags with you? I'm afraid that I'll meet someone like you, who hides all the valuable things. Yu Qianqiu stretched out his hand in disdain. Give me back the bracelet. Why are you so stingy? You've hidden a lot of treasures, but you don't need this. Give it to me to play with for a while. I'll give it back to you when the time comes. Nomju played with the bracelet fondly and put it on his wrist. He was quite satisfied with it. To be honest, he really liked it. Other than being an item from the immortal realm, it was really practical. Which cultivator wouldn't like such a large storage space? Give it back to me when the time comes? He didn't know how long he would have to wait. Yu Qianqiu looked at him coldly and said indifferently, I can give it to you, but you have to give me something in exchange. I heard from Zi that the purple bamboos in the South Sea purple bamboo forest can produce spiritual energy. I want half of them. What? Nomju suddenly realized and said, No, not even one. Humph. I knew that you love bamboo as much as your life. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and said, Now you know who's stingy. I'm giving you treasures from the immortal realm in exchange for your bamboos. I'm at a disadvantage, but you won't even give me one. Nongju smiled embarrassedly and touched the bracelet on his wrist. He suddenly sighed and said, "It's not that I want it. I just want to find a unique treasure for Ze as a dowry." Yu Qianqiu looked at his lonely face and knew that he didn't seem to be lying. He opened his mouth and was stunned for a while. Then he asked curiously, "As a dowry for Ze? Is Ze going to marry someone? Who is she going to marry? Which family does she belong to? How can she be liked by you, Mr. Nongju? Tell me and see if I know her or not. If I don't know her, at least let me know in advance so that I won't offend my own people." Bang! Nongju banged the table and shouted, "It's none of your business who she marries. ****, you snatched my stuff and still turned against me." Yu Qianqiu was also angry. He banged the table and shouted even louder, "It's none of my business? Give me back the bracelet. Why should my treasures be used as a dowry for your daughter? What kind of logic is this? Who cares about your treasures? Even if you give me 10,000 treasures, they can't compare to my Ze." Nongju's face was livid, and he threw the bracelet on his wrist. Yu Qianqiu caught it with one hand, and his arm became numb. He gritted his teeth and put the bracelet back on his wrist. He sneered and said, "It's good that you don't care about it. It's not like I have too many treasures to spend. I don't believe that anyone will complain about having too many treasures." While they were quarreling, Guan Zhongkai and Yulandu were chatting with Man Hu and others downstairs. They didn't know that the two people upstairs had turned against each other. After the quarrel, Nongju sat there in the box with a dull face and didn't say a word. "I'm so angry, you old bastard." Yu Qianqiu picked up a new pair of chopsticks and ate to his heart's content. The only sound in the room was the sound of his chewing. Nongju didn't come to herself until Yu Qianqiu burped. She looked at Yu Qianqiu helplessly and said, "Yu Qianqiu, tell me the truth. What do you think of the man in purple? ****, she's not marrying me. It's none of my business whether he's good or bad." Yu Qianqiu licked the grease on his mouth and put down the chopsticks. He looked at Nongju and shook his head. He thought, "This old handsome guy has the syndrome of marrying off his daughter. I won't argue with you, a patient." He picked up the tea and poured it into his mouth. He rinsed his mouth and flushed the residue in his mouth into his stomach. He tilted his head and thought silently. Nongju looked at his rude and uncultured look, and she hated him a little. She imagined that she had been elegant in the cultivation world all her life. At the end of the day, she met such a guy. It was karma. Yu Qianqiu thought for a while. Suddenly, he stretched his head and said suspiciously, "Is Ze really going to get married? Why didn't I hear anything about it before?"
Well,
"A grown girl can't be kept at home. I can't keep her for a lifetime." Nongju nodded slightly and then asked expressionlessly, "You seem to care a lot about Ze.
why?
What do you think about her getting married?" Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes on the spot, with a look of, "What can I think?" But he still said, "A grown girl can't be kept at home. You're right. You finally figured it out. That's the reason. Seriously, who is she going to marry? Tell me about it first. You know, I often get into conflicts with others. If I meet your son-in-law, I'll hit him too hard and accidentally. Well, you know." But in his heart, he was thinking, damn it, he didn't know whose son Nongju liked. He must have a powerful background. Damn it. He could use Nongju to build a good relationship with him. Maybe he would be a good helper.
Hey.
No, why did Nongju suddenly come to buy one country? Now she inexplicably said that Ze was going to get married. Did Wen Lanfeng have a son or a grandson? Never heard of it. Well, it shouldn't be a grandson. If so, the seniority between Nongju and Wen Lanfeng would be reduced by one generation for nothing. If Nongju and Ze knew what he was thinking, they would probably torture him to death on the spot.
Oh.
Nongju raised her eyebrows and sneered. "You're so cunning. Don't tell me that you've been thinking about Ze for a long time. Now you want to find out who Ze is going to marry for me, and then you can hurt her." Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded when he heard that. He then clapped and said, "My God. Senior Nomju, you're really daring. But don't think too much. Let me tell you this." Yu Qiancho stood up and said happily, "Z.E. She's really good-looking. Since she's going to get married, I'll admit it honestly. I did have some thoughts about her at the beginning. But don't get me wrong. It's not love. It's purely because she's beautiful.
Well,
We're both men, so I'm a little tempted." Seeing that Nomju was a little crazy, he quickly waved his hands and said, "Don't get me wrong. Let me finish." Yu Qiancho shook his head and sighed. "Let me tell you this. I had some thoughts about her at the beginning, but I immediately extinguished it. To be honest, I'm not afraid to let you know that I have 3 or 4 women, not just Farong. Because I know that even if I have feelings for Zi, you will definitely not agree to a man who has several women like me and Zi. In addition, because of your relationship with my master, I can't afford to offend you. Naturally, I gave up the idea early. So, you can rest assured that no matter who Zi marries, based on our relationship, I will only sincerely bless her and will never do anything to hurt your son-in-law. That's a bit unreliable. Anyway, I'm a dignified man. My character is not as bad as you think."
bang.
No one knew when Nongju's hand had touched the teacup on the table, but it was suddenly crushed by him. Yu Qiancho was startled and couldn't help asking, "What's wrong with you?" Nongju's face turned black. She couldn't help trembling and said, "What did you say? You said that you have 3 or 4 women other than Farong. Is what you said true?" Chapter 573. Yu Qiancho revealed an expression of "you don't understand me" and solemnly replied, "Don't look down on me just because I do things in a flashy manner. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm actually a very low-key person. Women belong to me. I am sincere to each of them. I don't need to show them off just to prove that I am a man. I only told you this because you asked me. Otherwise, I would have kept my mouth shut." B** starred. "You're speaking in such a dignified way." Nongju said word by word with hatred, "You're shameless." "You mean me?" Yu Qiancho pointed at his own nose, a look of confusion on his face. He didn't know what kind of medicine this fellow had eaten to fall out with him just like that. He retorted angrily, "No matter how shameless I am, I didn't do that kind of thing." He was not like some people who thought that they looked impressive and went around swindling people, fooling around with each person they played with. If you ask him to count how many women he has played with in his life, I'm afraid he can't even count himself. How could he be qualified to criticize others? What the hell? I've never seen such a shameless person before.
Bah.
Bang bang. Nongju turned the table upside down. The tableware such as bowls, chopsticks, and plates fell on the ground. She pointed at him and shouted, "Who are you talking about?" When Yu Qiancho turned hostile, he was also someone who wouldn't be swayed by force or persuasion. He immediately sneered and said, "I'm talking about whoever did that kind of thing."
Poor thing.
In the moon sect, Qionghua's lonely shadow faced Lung Hanyue. Missing you but not seeing you. Women met but didn't know each other. Heartbroken year after year. It's so miserable. I don't know who did it.
I dare you to say it again.
Nongju shouted angrily. It seemed that she was about to hit him. He. Mr. Nongju, you are famous in the world. You are very powerful. I can't afford to offend you, but I can hide from you. I won't say it. Yu Qiancho put on an expression of trying to keep the peace. He glanced at the mess on the ground, shook his head and sighed, hoeing the fields at noon, sweat dripping into the soil. Who would have thought that every single grain of food on the plate was so hard? Damn it, your father really knows how to talk. It's just a pity that this land is full of food. Nongju let out a muffled groan. She held her chest and staggered a step back. She bumped into the chair behind her and sat down. His face was pale as he panted heavily. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Yu Qiancho without blinking. Today, he finally witnessed what it meant to be sharp-tongued. His head buzzed, and he felt the blood in his chest rising. He almost spat something out because he couldn't hold it in. His lips were tightly shut, and he couldn't speak even if he wanted to. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He secretly smacked his tongue and reflected on himself. Oh my god. Back then, I made a nascent soul cultivator vomit blood in Ongquangsung. Am I going to make a soul formation cultivator vomit blood today? The higher the cultivation, the better the ability to piss people off. Wasn't it a bit too much? After all, he was not an outsider. But he shouldn't have gone too far. He also understood that people who had reached such a high level of cultivation would have opened up all the blocked meridians long ago. It was a small matter for them to be injured. But once they were so angry that they vomited blood, it would be a big problem. They were even more terrible than ordinary people. If their qi and blood were in disorder, their meridians would be damaged. It was not much different from being possessed by the devil during cultivation. It would take a long time to recuperate if it was light. But if it was heavy, their cultivation would be destroyed. It was not a joke. Don't be angry. If you want to scold me, I'll let you scold me. I won't fight back when you hit me or scold me. Yu Qianqiu sincerely admitted his mistake. Then he asked weakly, Are you all right? And Nongzhu's hand that had just been put down pressed on his chest again. His chest was rising and falling rapidly. He quickly closed his eyes, put his hands in his dantian, and silently ran his qi to regulate his breath. How could he be angry like this? Yu Qianqiu was so shocked that he covered his mouth immediately. He was afraid that he couldn't help but say something else. However, he didn't expect that Nongzhu, who was so thick-skinned, couldn't stand the provocation. He was so surprised that he didn't dare to speak easily. After all, he was not someone else. If something bad happened to him because of his anger, he couldn't explain it when he went back. After a long time, Nongzhu's flushed face gradually returned to normal. He slowly breathed out and opened his eyes. He stared at Yu Qianqiu, who was standing there obediently for a while. Suddenly, he showed an expression that he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He sat there alone, shaking his head and giggling. He had never thought that someone could actually anger him to this extent. Good Lord! Every word was like a knife, piercing the soft spot. It was really a deep attack. Even his cultivation at the middle stage of Huashan realm almost couldn't bear it. Who would believe it? His smile didn't matter, but it scared Yu Qianqiu. Was he so angry that he became stupid? That would be a big sin. Yu Qianqiu was a little scared and asked carefully, Senior Nongzhu, are you okay? He asked the question 3 times, but he was still giggling. He was completely panicked. He flashed over and grabbed Nongzhu's wrist to check his body.
Bang!
Nongzhu slapped his hand away, stood up, and scolded him fiercely. What are you doing? You want me to die early, don't you? Let me tell you, it's impossible for me to die. Even if you die, I will still be alive and kicking. Damn, I'm so angry. Yes, I was wrong. Yu Qianqiu nodded and bowed, patted his chest and said, Damn, I was scared to death. When he was too angry, he became much calmer and didn't think so impulsively. Nongzhu regained his calmness. Looking at him with a lingering fear, a trace of warmth flashed through his eyes, and then he became indifferent again. He said, It's rare. You didn't want me to die early.
What are you talking about?
I'm so honest. I burn incense and pray for you whenever I have the time, and I wish for nothing more than for you to live a long and healthy life. Yu Qianqiu said these kind words in a heartwarming manner. He was truly afraid that this paper-thin guy would do something bad again. Now he found that Nongzhu's mental age was really different from his actual age. Wasn't he being childish? Stop. Nongzhu was angry and funny at the same time. She said, You are so busy, and you still have time to burn incense and pray for me? What were you doing just now? Yu Qianqiu wanted to defend himself, but he was worried that Nongzhu would be irritated again. So he swallowed his words and corrected himself. He said, Yes. I deeply recognize my mistake, and I will change. I'm sure you will be satisfied. Is it really karma? Ha! This is fate. Nongzhu shook her head helplessly. Glancing at the mess on the ground, she relaxed and stared at Yu Qianqiu. She sighed and said, Don't talk nonsense anymore. I have something to tell you. You can tell Z when you find the right opportunity. I believe you can seize this opportunity. Yu Qianqiu showed a puzzled face and asked, what is it that you can't tell Z directly? Why do you want me to tell her? Is it about the relationship between you two, father and daughter? Nongzhu shook her head sadly and said, it doesn't matter whether Z recognizes me as her father or not, because I didn't really fulfill my responsibility as a father. I'm really ashamed of her. You can tell her that her father's name is Xiaoyao and I, Nongzhu, am just her teacher. What I want you to tell her is the past of her father, Xiaoyao, and her mother, Qianghua Fairy.
She has the right to know this.
I can't hide it from her forever. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. It was interesting to gossip about a handsome man and a beautiful woman. However, seeing Nongzhu's unprecedentedly lonely expression, he had to restrain himself so as not to irritate her again. He nodded and said, I will try my best to live up to your trust. It was a beautiful day. We met in the green mountains and clear waters, and we fell in love at first sight. Everything seemed so beautiful, and I really fell in love with her. However, such a beautiful beginning couldn't end well, which was beyond my expectation. Nongzhu's handsome face was full of confusion about the past. He traveled across time and space and slowly told the story of the past that had been covered in dust. Some things are destined, and you can't avoid it even if you wanna. It turned out that Nongzhu really fell in love with Qianghua Fairy at first sight. He didn't just play with her like other women, but really wanted to be with her forever. Therefore, he planted the crystallization of their love in Qianghua Fairy's body. Otherwise, with his cultivation, how could Qianghua Fairy get pregnant so easily? In fact, from the beginning, Nongzhu knew that Qianghua Fairy was a cultivator and thought she was an individual cultivator. However, with the latter's cultivation, she couldn't tell that Nongzhu was also a cultivator. Since Qianghua Fairy didn't mention her identity as a cultivator, Nongzhu didn't tell her either. At that time, Nongzhu was blinded by blind love. He only hoped that they could be equal and didn't want to compete with each other. Therefore, he didn't tell her that he was a master in the Huashan realm. He didn't want to scare Qianghua Fairy more or less. After going through the long life of mortals, he was used to seeing too much deception and was somewhat tired of it. He just wanted the love between them to be purer and less distracting. He thought that maybe Qianghua Fairy also thought the same, so she didn't tell him that she was a cultivator. He thought that with their relationship, it would be a great surprise when they told each other the truth. Because the love between the two of them would not be limited by their lifespans and be too short. Just think about it. How could they not be pleasantly surprised? Nongzhu had already thought about it. Once they knew each other's cultivator identity, he would take Qianghua Fairy back to the South Sea purple bamboo forest and live a carefree life. After Ziyi was born, Nongzhu was overjoyed. But at this time, Qianghua Fairy suddenly told Nongzhu that she was a cultivator. She was a disciple of the Moon Clan. Nongzhu didn't care about her identity. With her cultivation, she could take away a disciple from the Moon Clan, and no one would dare to stop her. But what Qianghua Fairy wanted to say was that apart from being a disciple of the Moon Clan, she was also the successor of the next leader of the Moon Clan. Chapter 574. What surprised Nongzhu even more was that the Moon Clan had a secret that they didn't tell outsiders. All disciples of the Moon Clan could have children outside, but if their daughters were talented enough to cultivate, they had to bring them back to the Moon Clan and cultivate under the Moon Clan. If it was a son, the Moon Clan wouldn't accept him. It was better to let the man carry on the family line, because the Moon Clan never accepted male disciples. Qianghua Fairy felt guilty and told Nongzhu that she was going to bring her daughter back to the Moon Clan to cultivate. She asked Nongzhu to find another wife. As for her, she was going to continue the Moon Clan sooner or later. She couldn't spend the rest of her life with an ordinary person like him. One could imagine how angry Nongzhu was at that time. He had lived a carefree life among the flowers for half of his life, and it was not easy for him to settle down and give his heart to her. He did not expect this to be the result. She felt like she was cheated. Plus, with her cultivation and status in the cultivation world, How could she allow her daughter to cultivate in a small moon clan? That was the biggest joke in the world. With her cultivation of the soul formation state, she couldn't teach her daughter better than a small moon clan. Plus, Nomju couldn't let her daughter follow in the footsteps of her mother. Nomju didn't care about the leader of the Moon Clan. Nomju wanted to kill her way to the Moon Clan and raze the entire Moon Clan to the ground. But thinking about it, she felt that it would be too easy for Chonghua Fairy. She lied to her so badly. If a man who didn't fall in love easily found out that he was cheated after falling in love, the consequences would be terrible. Plus, he was a very powerful and capable man. Nomju was determined to let Chonghua Fairy taste the feeling of being cheated. She would regret it for the rest of her life. Chonghua Fairy knew that Nomju wouldn't be happy if she did that. However, her daughter was in her hands and Nomju couldn't take her away. She kept persuading Nomju, saying that it was for her daughter's good and that she didn't want her daughter to be like him, an ordinary person for the rest of her life. Nomju only sneered at that time. But she didn't expect that Nomju was a legendary cultivator of the soul formation state. It would be easy for her to take her daughter away from her. Therefore, on a sunset, the viburnum flower fairy had just gone out to grab something and turned around. When he came in again, he found that his daughter, who had just been placed on the bed, was gone. She immediately guessed that it was bamboo, so she looked around. However, it was impossible for her to find Nomju with her cultivation. Since then, the Jade Flower Fairy had never seen the man called Xiaoyao again. Her infant daughter also disappeared with him. Nomju naturally brought her daughter back to the purple bamboo forest and taught her carefully. From then on, the Southern Sea Purple Bamboo Forest had a female disciple called Zi. For the sake of her daughter, Nomju completely gave up the habit of flirting. Of course, Jasper Flower Fairy also played a part in it. She had broken his heart completely, and he had learned from her painful experience that he would never touch another woman again. Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. He opened his mouth wide and didn't know what to say. So there was such a hidden story. It took him a long time to come back to his senses. He swallowed his saliva, scratched his stiff chin, and looked at the absent-minded Nomju, speechless. At that time, he thought that Nomju, the playboy, abandoned her and played around. As a result, she got pregnant and gave birth to a baby. Then she ran away because she was unwilling to take responsibility. He never thought that the most handsome man in the world was dumped by his sister. Unbelievable. Thinking back, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but smile bitterly. No wonder Nomju asked him to find a chance to tell Ziyi about it. Thinking about Ziyi's strange life, how could Nomju tell her? Even if he told Ziyi, he would have to find a time when Ziyi could accept it. Damn it! Would Ziyi take things too hard and say that I'm talking nonsense and fight with me?
What?
No way. In this case, it would be more appropriate to let Ziyi's future husband tell her. Why did she come to me? She was trying to hurt me. Yu Qianqiu pinched his chin, and his face twitched. Ahem. That. Senior Nomju, I think. Nomju slowly turned around and said, What do you think? Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and smiled bitterly. I think that this kind of words. I think Ziyi's closest person should tell her. Think about it. No one else can find a good chance for Ziyi to accept. Only the person closest to her can find a chance. Don't you think so? For example, the man Ziyi is going to marry, right? It doesn't seem appropriate for me to tell her. To be honest, I'm a little scared. Let's see then.
Just keep this in mind for now.
By the way, Nomju sneered and said, the man Ziyi is going to marry also has 3 or 4 women. I'm a little worried. I'm afraid, Ziyi, you will be wronged in the future. What do you think I should do? Damn it. Why don't you just let Ziyi marry me? Don't let the goodies flow to others. Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart. But thinking about it, maybe in Nomju's eyes, his future son-in-law was one of his own, and he, Yu Qianqiu, was an outsider. Thinking about it, he was a little angry. He immediately patted his chest and said, That's easy. As long as you say it, I'll find a way to do it for you. It's just 3 or 4 women. If you want to kill me, just say it. I promise you'll do it without anyone knowing. Your son-in-law will never suspect you. She wanted him to stay by Ziyi's side and live an honest life. If he dares to marry me in the future, as long as I know it, I promise I'll make Ziyi unique. If he keeps doing it, I don't mind making him a eunuch. The corner of Nongju's mouth twitched. She smacked her lips and said, I believe you. You're the best at doing this kind of thing. It won't be a problem for you. Her words made Yu Qianqiu a little unhappy. What did she mean by, I'm the best at doing this kind of thing? He curled his lips and said, Senior Nongju, I never do this kind of thing. Only when you say it, I'll do my best. This is called keeping promises and valuing credibility. Forget it. It's fine as long as you have the heart. Nongju waved her hand and asked, If I want to marry my daughter to him, should he give me a betrothal gift first? How much do you think I should accept to marry my daughter to him? Yes. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, You're kidding. Mr. Nongju is famous in the cultivation world. Your daughter is even more precious than him. How can the betrothal gift not be enough? By the way, is your future son-in-law rich? Nongju thought for a while and said slowly, Rich. There are many treasures. Any one of them is a rare treasure. But that guy is a miser. I'm afraid it's a little difficult for him to take out a big gift. Any one of them is a rare treasure? Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up and he swallowed his saliva with difficulty. He couldn't stop clicking his tongue in his heart. I knew it. The son-in-law that Nongju likes must be from a powerful family. I don't know who he is. If I want to build a relationship with him in the future, even if he's a miser, I'll pluck some of his feathers. *CK. Yu Qianqiu said indignantly. The richer a man is, the more stingy he is. He doesn't even want to give a big gift to his wife. It's reasonable for a poor man like me. Why won't he give a big gift even if he has money? How can you swallow this? Tell me who the bastard is. I'll avenge you sooner or later. He had already begun to plan in his heart. After torturing the World Chamber of Commerce, his next stop would be Nongju's rich son-in-law. Speaking of him, I'm full of anger. I don't want to talk about him. By the way, what about you? Nongju asked. What about me? Yu Qianqiu didn't know why he asked this. Nongju said with a fake smile, I'm marrying my daughter. Aren't you going to give her a gift? *CK. You don't have the ability to get your son-in-law's betrothal gift. Why do you want me to give a gift? Is there anyone who asks for a gift from a guest before they even get married? I'm so easy to bully. Yu Qianqiu curled his lips and said with a smile, That one came in a hurry. He didn't bring anything good with him. How about this? On the day of Ziyi's marriage, I'll definitely bring a gift to congratulate her. No, you have to receive the gift before you get married. Nongju said seriously. Receive a gift in advance? Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and said suspiciously, How come I didn't know there was such a rule in the cultivation world? This is the rule of my southern sea purple bamboo forest. Nongju's face stiffened. Then, he thought of a suitable reason and explained, Furthermore, you're very busy. When the time comes, you won't even know where I'm going to inform you. While I'm here, it's good to receive the gift in advance. Don't tell me that you're so stingy that you won't even give a gift when Z gets married. He. What are you saying? Am I that stingy? I'm just thinking about what I should give her. Yu Qianqiu said perfunctorily. However, after thinking about the close relationship between him and Ziyi, it would be a little inappropriate to give an ordinary gift. Subconsciously, he touched the storage bag on his waist and found that it was gone. Only then did he remember that it was taken away by Nongju and was lying on the ground. Nongju had already checked it. If he took something out from it, it would be a little inappropriate. So, he smiled at Nongju and put one hand into the clothes on his chest. He pulled out another storage bag from under his armpit. Nongju's eyes twitched. She thought to herself, There's another storage bag on her body. Yu Qianqiu reached into his storage pouch and pulled out a sword with simple and unadorned patterns. He held it in his hand and examined it. But then, his regretful expression turned resolute. He said straightforwardly, This sword is the same style as the one I gave to my master. They're both treasures of that immortal. Since Ce is getting married, I have nothing to say. I'll congratulate her with a generous gift. Senior Nongju, you won't say that I'm stingy, will you? As he said this, he held the sword with both hands and handed it over. I sincerely wish Ziyi a happy life. Nongju's eyes lit up. She took it and touched it. As expected, it was not inferior to the one she gave to Bai Chongchun. She couldn't help but praise. Good sword. Then, she nodded with satisfaction and said, You still have a conscience. Chapter 575. Hehe. The gift is too small. As long as you are satisfied. Yu Qianqiu laughed happily. He didn't realize that he had sold himself. Nongju sheathed her sword and inexplicably felt relieved. It was as if the courage that had been on her shoulders had finally been removed. She looked at Yu Qianqiu again and thought of the day when Ziyi bullied him on Shuntian Island. She suddenly felt refreshed. Can't catch you? Someone can. You will suffer in the future. Yu Qianqiu suddenly found a strange smile on Nongju's lips. His heart skipped a beat and he immediately became alert. Is she using Ziyi's marriage as an excuse to cheat me of my treasure? That's too shameless. So, he asked suspiciously, What are you laughing at? Are you using Ziyi to cheat me of my treasure? Cheat your head. Will I cheat you with Ziyi's life? Nongju scolded. She felt angry and funny looking at this guy. No matter how cunning he would still have a blind spot when thinking about problems. This guy's EQ was extremely low. As for his low EQ, Yu Qianqiu had actually discovered it himself. Since his previous life, he had been living in deception and killing. He didn't have the mood to play romantic and delicate love. Saving his life was the first priority. Although he had met many women, and it was common for him to play around with them, he could tell whether a woman was good or bad at a glance. However, he had no experience in serious love. Later, he made a name for himself and had a position in Jianghu. In addition, the women he met at that time were quite realistic. Therefore, for him, no matter how beautiful a woman was, she was still an animal on the bed. Talking about love with them? He was either talking nonsense or courting death. Because he had no experience in this aspect, and this life was the fate of his previous life, he was still fighting and killing. Therefore, the women he found in this life were as simple and kind as possible. Because he felt that it was too tiring to play mind games with his woman, and he didn't have the energy to deal with it. He had chosen Furong, Wu Lixue, Chu Ping'er, and Bai Suzhen, who had been silently sacrificing herself for him. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. He had thought it through. Among the 3 women who had a romantic relationship, only Chu Ping'er had a complicated life experience. However, it was a dream that led him to join the cultivation world, and he instinctively wanted to protect this dream. As for Furong and Wu Lixue, they were 2 simple and pure women. So, what if he said they were stupid? In short, he liked them very much. Wasn't Bai Suzhen the same? She was a woman who only knew how to treat him well. It was also because of these women who did not hold him back that he could do whatever he wanted in the cultivation world without any worries. In fact, the reason why he didn't bring the women together was because he was worried that they would clash and cause trouble for him, and he didn't have time to deal with them. After all, women were also human beings. Who would be willing to share the same man with others? In such a contradictory situation, he could only take one step at a time. If he had to blame someone, he could only blame himself for being a bit fickle. Every time he thought about it, he would tell himself that it didn't matter if he had a low EQ. He would try his best to treat them well. Definitely. Of course, a low EQ didn't mean that he was an idiot. For a woman like the enchantress who dared to love and hate openly, how could he not know her feelings? However, some things were difficult for him to accept. It was really difficult, and it was better for him to avoid it. I was just saying. I didn't mean anything else. Don't be angry. Hearing Nongju's scolding, he agreed with a silly smile. It was true. Nongju would not cheat others with Ziyi's life. Otherwise, she would not be Nongju. It seemed that Ziyi was really going to get married. What a pity. Although she was sometimes unruly, she was still a simple girl. But she was going to be someone else's woman. Damn it. I'm going back to Shuntian Island in a few days. Do you have any words for me to take back? Nomju looked at him with an evil smile. Aren't you very capable? When you become my son-in-law, I will torture you. Let's see if you still have any temper then. Now he had thought it through. Since his daughter liked him, could he really be cruel and stop her by force? The answer was definitely no. Taking 10,000 steps back and thinking about it, this guy wasn't completely useless. Although he was a little bad in this sinister cultivation world, he had the ability to protect himself. This was not necessarily a bad thing for Ze, who was inexperienced in the world. Moreover, Lao Bai had an extraordinary vision. He thought so highly of him and hinted many times that he could let Ze be with him without worry. There must be a reason. Then let nature take its course. In fact, what moved Nomju the most was Yu Qiancho's care for Farong. He had always wanted to find a man for his daughter. He was the type who could take good care of his daughter, but who told him to act too late, and another woman had already beat him to it. But who could see that this bad guy had such a disgusting side? Could he blame himself for making a mistake? Yu Qiancho scratched his head embarrassedly. He smiled and said, Senior, please help me tell Farong to stay in Shuntian Island. I'm fine outside. And my master, please send my regards to him. Ha ha. That's all? Nomju reminded. Don't you have any words for Ze? She sounded a little unhappy. Yes. Yu Qiancho quickly nodded and said, help me congratulate Ze. On the day she gets married, I will definitely prepare a big gift for her. That's more like it. Nomju suddenly sighed. Remember to treat Ze well in the future. I don't need you to remind me. Based on our relationship, I will definitely treat her well. Yu Qiancho patted his chest and promised, don't worry. Ze's business is my business. Tell her, no matter who she marries, if she encounters any trouble in the future, just let me know. I don't dare to promise anything else, but murder and arson. No, I mean I won't hesitate to go through water and tread on fire. Idiot. Nomju scolded, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. She pointed at him and said, I heard that you, Yu Qiancho, are very talented. I really wonder if you plagiarized those things from somewhere. They don't match up at all. Yu Qiancho didn't care. They were plagiarized things anyway. Nomju asked again, tell me honestly. You became Neo Yud and created that restriction-breaking pill. What are you trying to do?
Hey.
You know I have a lot of women and expenses. If I don't make some money, how can I support my family? Yu Qiancho shook his head helplessly. Nomju's mouth twitched. Listening to him, it seemed that her daughter would not be short of money in the future. This was a good thing. She paused and said, you have your eyes on the world commerce? Isn't it said that the world commerce is the richest? Yu Qiancho said weakly. Humph. Be careful. Een Baikong's money isn't that easy to get. Don't let your women become widows before you can get your money. Nomju's words were sarcastic, but there was a rare sense of concern. The difference in treatment between a family and a non-family was huge. Yu Qiancho laughed and said, whether or not he can get the money is another matter. But if he wants to kill me, I'm afraid that Een Baikong is still lacking. Nomju glanced at him. She still had some confidence in his ability to escape. It was definitely not a coincidence that this guy could escape from death time and time again. He must have something to rely on. Otherwise, with his cultivation, he wouldn't dare to touch Een Baikong. How audacious. Do as you see fit. If there's nothing else, I'll leave first. Nomju was about to turn around when she heard Yu Qiancho ask, Senior Nomju, let me ask you something. Do you know who the one-armed guy in the Ghost Manor is? Also, I saw a mysterious masked woman in the Ghost Manor. The one-armed old man was very respectful to her. Nomju asked casually, you met both of them in the Ghost Manor?
Yes.
Yu Qiancho nodded and said, I feel that the one-armed old man is a spirit-severing master. But he was very respectful to the masked woman. Could it be that she is also a spirit-severing master? Yes, both of them are spirit-severing masters. Moreover, both of them are people with great backgrounds. Speaking of which, they are related to your master. Nongju explained, the one-armed old man is called Li Duxing. Like his name, he was a loner in the cultivation world and never had any contact with anyone. That woman should be Lu Yanqing from the Lingfang Valley. The most beautiful woman in the world, Lu Yanqing? Yu Qianqiu showed a trace of regret. It was a pity that he didn't see her face at that time. Then he was slightly taken aback. He had dragged third brother Xian into the picture. Could it be that he had exposed himself? But he didn't think it was possible. Even if she asked third Xian, how could he know who Niuyud was? At most, he would think that he was talking nonsense to confuse people. But he didn't know that third Xian had asked his master about the origin of this method after he saw the horror of his absorbing stars technique. Lu Yanqing didn't know either. But when she saw Niuyud fight in the ghost manner, she guessed that he was Yu Qianqiu. Nongju saw that he was tempted by her beauty and snorted. What? Are you interested in Lu Yanqing?
No.
I just want to see what the most beautiful woman in the world looks like. Don't get the wrong idea. Yu Qianqiu waved his hands awkwardly and quickly changed the topic. Lu Yanqing, I know you had a conflict with my master. What's the relationship between Li Duxing and my master? 500 years ago, Li Duxing was also a proud man with extraordinary aptitude. At that time, he had just broken through from the middle stage of spirit severing to the last stage of spirit severing. But he didn't know how proud he was. Instead, he went to challenge your master directly, bypassing the other 9 of the top 10 masters. Don't you know what kind of person your master is? As a result, he was seriously injured by your master on the spot. He was lucky that I happened to be playing in Shuntian Island. So, he begged your master to let him go. Nongju shook her head slightly and sighed with emotion. Yu Qianqiu looked at him with a bit of boredom and thought, damn it. My master is a villain, but you're a good guy. You're like Song Jiang in time. No wonder he is so popular in the cultivation world. Everyone owes him a favor. Nongju continued. In fact, I have never dealt with Li Duxing. I only heard of his name. We don't know each other. He was very arrogant when he broke into the demon ghost realm and was very rude to me. To be honest, I didn't want to save him at that time. Later, I saw that he was beaten so badly by your master that he almost didn't look like a human and lost one of his arms. Finally, I couldn't bear to see him like that, so I saved him. But when I saved him, I found that he was unconscious. There were more than 80 holes in his body because of your master's finger. He was so miserable. He is completely relying on his profound cultivation to hang on to his last breath. Based on my ability, there is no way I can save him. I had to send him to Lu Yanqing in Lingfang Valley. Chapter 576. Yu Qianqiu asked in surprise. He's already injured like that, but Lu Yanqing still saved him? Nongju shook her head and said, I don't know. I didn't know that Li Duxing was still alive until I heard that he appeared in Ghost Village. He should have been saved by Lu Yanqing. With an injury like that, I reckon that other than Lu Yanqing's wonderful hands, no one else would be able to save him. But I heard that his cultivation dropped from the last stage of Huashan Realm to the early stage of Huashan Realm. I don't know if his cultivation has improved after all these years. Tut. In this case, that one-armed old fart owes you a life-saving grace. Yu Qianqiu said with a chuckle. He was still in a coma and didn't know that I saved him. What's more, I didn't contact him, and I don't want him to owe me anything. When I handed him over to Lu Yanqing, I told Lu Yanqing not to tell him that I saved him. I think Li Duxing doesn't know about it. Nongju said lightly.
Oh.
Yu Qianqiu made a long oh sound, which seemed to say, I didn't know that you are so noble and unquestionable. You did a good deed without leaving your name. Nongju ignored his sarcastic tone and reminded him, so many years have passed. I don't know what Li Duxing thinks about what happened that year. Be careful when you meet him in the future. Don't let him know that you are Bai's disciple. If he still holds a grudge against you, I'm afraid he will hurt you.
I see.
Yu Qianqiu nodded. Suddenly, he frowned and seemed to think of something. He asked seriously, what's the relationship between you and Wenlan Foam? Hearing this, Nongju looked at him seriously and warned, Don't you dare have any bad ideas about Wenlan Feng. This time, he didn't hesitate to fall out with the 6 masters and use them to show his power. It's all because he promised me and your master that he would support you in Shuntian Island. Don't be so ungrateful. Needless to say, I'm not a person who returns kindness with ingratitude. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said in a low voice, but he lost a master. I don't know if he will have other thoughts. Other than being infatuated with Lu Yanqing, he is an upright person, and his relationship with me is not bad. Since you promised me to take care of you, you won't play tricks behind my back. You're trustworthy. Nongzhu asked suspiciously, what are you trying to say? It's like this. Yu Qianqiu asked, when you came up just now, did you see the young man beside Man Hu? You mean the boy at the early stage of nature's test? Nongzhu asked. That's right. That person is the trader of the Chinese cultivation world, Yan Juexing, one of the Yan father and son who retreated to the Everlasting Island. I didn't expect him to come here. It's really suspicious, Yu Qianqiu said with a frown.
Oh, so it was him.
Nongzhu joked. I heard that you and he were sworn enemies in the Chinese cultivation world. Yu Qianqiu ignored his sarcasm. A fierce light flashed in his eyes. He squinted slightly, stared at Nongzhu, and said slowly, help me kill him. You want me to kill Yan Juexing? Nongzhu stared at him up and down in surprise for a while, and then said with a smile, no. Don't you claim to be the best master below the Huashan realm? You've killed several masters at the late stage of nature's test. Yan Juexing is just at the early stage of nature's test. It's easy for you to kill him. What's more, I heard that Yan Juexing was defeated by you when he was in the Chinese cultivation world. He should be no match for you. Why do you want me to help you kill him? It should be a kind of intuition. I don't know why, but I always feel that he will be a great disaster if he stays, and we must eradicate him as soon as possible. By the way, I remember something. Yu Qianqiu asked, do you remember that Z and I once held a sword drawing contest in the Chinese cultivation world? I've heard a little about it. Nongzhu nodded slightly and carefully observed the expression on Yu Qianqiu's face. She found that his expression was very serious when he talked about Yan Juexing. This made him take it seriously. He thought to himself that this guy was not afraid of anything and even dared to kill masters at the Huashan realm, but he was afraid of a cultivator at the early stage of nature's test. It was really puzzling. You also know that the 2 swords were condensed by the ghost fire of the netherworld. During the sword drawing contest, one of Man Hu's junior brothers was killed by the black fire. But do you know how evil Yan Juexing is? Yu Qianqiu still had some lingering fear when he thought of the scene at that time. Yan Juexing's extremely cold eyes. After a pause, he continued, that guy is not afraid of the black fire, and he even inhaled the evil spirit released by the black fire as oxygen. And that pair of eyes, oh my god, are those still human eyes? Damn, they are so evil.
Z also saw it at that time.
You can ask her if you don't believe me. There is such a thing? Nongzhu was also shocked. Others did not know the power of the black fire, but she had personally entered the 9th Netherworld cave and the Sea of Netherworld. Even though she was at the middle stage of Huashan realm, she did not dare to stay in front of the Sea of Netherworld for too long. She naturally knew how powerful the black spirit released by the black fire was, especially the black wind blade condensed by the black spirit, which was one of the biggest obstacles to the 9th Netherworld cave. But Yan Juexing was only at the early stage of nature's test. He was not afraid of the ghost fire of the netherworld, and he could even absorb the black spirit. Even Bai Changchun was afraid of it, but he was not afraid of it. It would be strange if Nongzhu was not shocked. Yu Qianqiu snorted fiercely. I don't care how evil he is. It is better to eliminate the root of the problem than to nip it in the bud. With my cultivation, I can't find a chance to do it now, otherwise I would have done it long ago. So, please help me get rid of him as soon as possible. A ruthless character was revealed without a doubt. Nongzhu was stunned by his look. She thought, old Bai is cruel and merciless, But this guy is not only cruel and merciless, but also fierce and unscrupulous. Where did he learn all these? I can't help you with this. Nomju shook her head slowly and said, Yan Juexing is one of the main figures in the war against the Huaxia cultivation world with the support of various countries. I promised them that I would not interfere in the war between them and the Huaxia cultivation world. Once I help you kill Yan Juexing, I will break the promise I made. Yu Qianqiu stamped his feet in exasperation and said, Hey, why are you so pedantic? I didn't ask you to do it openly. You could have killed him secretly. With your cultivation, killing him would be a piece of cake. If you did it secretly, no one would know it was you. Go to hell as far as you can. Nomju was a little embarrassed and said, Do you think I am like you? I do things by hook or by crook. I will definitely keep my promise to others. This is my bottom line as a person. Yu Qianqiu was speechless for a while. Then he bowed and tried to persuade her with good intentions. Let's not talk about the hatred between me and him. He will seek revenge on me sooner or later. But I really have a very strong feeling that you may not believe it if I say it. When I saw him in the saber drawing contest, I had a very strong premonition that this guy will become a scourge of the Huaxia cultivation world sooner or later. Just think of it as getting rid of the scourge of the Huaxia cultivation world. He had a premonition that Yan Juexing would become a scourge of the Huaxia cultivation world, and Yan Juexing had a premonition that he would meet him in Baiwan country. I don't know whether these two guys are telling the truth or not. Anyway, it is a little mysterious. Nomju snorted and smiled. This guy is fooling me again. He obviously wants to use me to get rid of the dissidents, but he uses a premonition as an excuse. If he wants to fool me, he should find a better reason. I think you will become a scourge of the Huaxia cultivation world sooner or later. No, you are already a scourge of the Huaxia cultivation world. Wherever you go, there will be chaos and no peace. Even if what you said is true, I will not break my bottom line. Nomju shook her head unmoved. **CK. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help swearing. But he was still not reconciled. He rolled his eyes and said, Wait, since you have a good relationship with Wen Lanfeng, there is something I have to remind you. If you have something to say, just say it. Don't beat around the bush. Nomju said impatiently. Did you notice when you passed by just now? Don't you find it strange that Yan Juexing is actually hanging out with that hipster girl? Yu Qianqiu reminded him with good intentions. Nomju looked at him vigilantly, but after thinking for a while, she also felt something was wrong. Although Hipster was a member of the royal family, she was a mortal and had nothing to do with cultivators. At most, she knew a little martial arts. But Yan Juexing, Man Hu, and the other four masters at the end of the nature's test were together with her. Could they be friends, seeing that he was thinking? Yu Qianqiu did not forget to add fuel to the fire. You may not know Yan Juexing, but he and I are enemies. I know him very well. As the saying goes, the person who knows you best is your enemy. We have a deep understanding of each other. Seeing that Nomju was listening carefully, he continued. Yan Juexing is extremely vicious. When he was still in the 100 Flowers Valley of Huaxia, he controlled a group of people with poison. The most terrifying thing was that he had somehow found the long-lost, primordial soul-stripping technique and had been secretly controlling the cultivators of the cultivation world for his own use. Later, he used those people to burn, kill, and loot. Unfortunately, I ran into him, and it was because I exposed him that we became enemies. If you don't believe me, you can ask around in the Huaxia cultivation world. Then you will know whether what I said is true or not. Are you saying that he is plotting against the hipster girls? Nomju asked casually, while thinking. Hipster is nothing. So, what if he is a member of the royal family? Even if you give that girl to him, I'm afraid he will be too lazy to take her with him. She is a burden. He even brought 4 masters at the end of the nature's test to go shopping with that girl. What a ghost. Do you believe that he is so kind? Yu Qianqiu sneered, and then said very seriously, I suspect that guy has designs on the Wen family. Otherwise, he will not be interested in a hipster. Since you have a good relationship with Wen Lanfeng, you should let him be on his guard. You don't want me to find Wen Lanfeng and ask him to kill Yan Juexing, do you? Nongju suddenly came to her senses. She realized that this guy had already planned to kill Yan Juexing when he mentioned Wen Lanfeng. But he encouraged her to do it. Seeing that she did not agree, he showed his true colors. It was really one trap after another. Chapter 577. At this point, Yu Qianqiu didn't want to hide it anymore. It was meaningless. He said, "Let's not beat around the bush. Since you don't want to do it, let Wen Lanfeng do it. It's for the good of the Wen family." Impossible. Wen Lanfeng can't kill an early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator for no reason. He's not like Yin Baikong. If he were that kind of person, I wouldn't be friends with him. Nongju saw that Yu Qianqiu didn't want to give up, so she waved her hand and said, "All right. Don't try to persuade me anymore. You figure it out yourself. He's just an early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator. It's not worth it for a soul formation cultivator to do it. Don't you know some early-stage tribulation-passing cultivators? You'd better target them. Although I haven't seen Yan Juexing fight, I'm afraid even an early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator is no match for him." Yu Qianqiu asked, "Do you believe me?" "It doesn't matter if I believe you or not. You figure out yourself. I'll go back and tell Wen Lanfeng about the hipster." Nongju lifted her hand and removed the soundproof barrier. She opened the door and walked out slowly with her hands behind her back. "Pedantic. I'll do it myself," Yu Qianqiu muttered and followed behind Nongju. When the door opened, everyone's eyes were fixed on the upstairs. They saw two people walk out one after another and walk down the stairs. The most eye-catching one was Niu Yud, who walked behind them. He was not an ordinary person. How many people dared to be as arrogant as him in the cultivation world? Even Yan Juexing's gaze towards him was filled with admiration. The hipster was afraid. This person was comparable to Mr. Nongju. As for the shopkeepers and workers in the shop, they were trembling with fear. Imagine what kind of person would dare to look down on the princess. "Mr. Nongju, Senior Niu." A group of people saluted. The two of them nodded slightly in acknowledgement, both of them looking like experts. Nongju took the opportunity to take a serious look at Yan Juexing and then glanced at Hipster. Without saying anything, she walked out of the store and said to Wen Chongzheng, who was bowing at the door, "Let these people go back. Let's go." Wen Chongzheng hurriedly shouted at the leaders of the soldiers outside and then chased after Nongju eagerly. As for the soldiers, they had no choice but to withdraw. Yu Qianqiu glanced at everyone expressionlessly. His eyes paused on Yan Juexing as he let out a sound of surprise. Yan Juexing and Man Hu exchanged glances with each other. They did not know what Niu Yud had seen. Yulan smiled and said, "Senior Niu, is there something wrong? What's your name?" Yu Qianqiu asked Yan Juexing. With a faint smile, Yan Juexing bowed politely and said, "I'm Yan Juexing. What can I do for you, senior?" Could it be that they already knew? Being reminded by him, the two of them were shocked. They suddenly remembered something that was known by all the forces. Everyone had been wondering why Bing Qingzi's side valued the Yan father and son so much. Especially towards Yan Juexing, the few disciples of Bing Qingzi almost never left his side. Guan Zhongkai revealed an expression of sudden realization. He cupped his hands and said impatiently, "Senior, I have something to do. I'll leave for a while. I'll be back soon." Yulan did the same. The two of them seemed to be afraid that Yu Qianqiu wouldn't agree. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and sighed. "I know what you want to do. Is there a need to do this? Why worry about it? Even if the sky falls, there will be someone taller to hold it up. Don't blame me for not reminding you. I just exposed Yan Juexing's background. Although they can't do anything to me, they won't be afraid of you. If you are by my side, they definitely won't dare to touch you. But once you leave me, they might kill you to silence you. Of course, if you have to go back to report, I suggest that you two stay together. It's safer to stay together." Yu Qianqiu was naturally afraid that something would happen to the two of them. If the two witnesses died and the words came out of Niu Yud's mouth, even if it was true, no one would believe it. That was why he didn't forget to remind them so that their efforts wouldn't go to waste. Thank you for the reminder, Senior. The two of them bowed and thanked him. They looked at each other and nodded. Then they rushed out of the back door of the restaurant. Yan Zhuixing. Yan Zhuixing. You haven't tasted the feeling of being hunted, right? I've already had my fill. You and I are enemies. How can we favor one and discriminate against the other? I'll let you have some fun too. Otherwise, I'll be sorry. I'll also watch the show. Yu Qianqiu muttered and revealed a wretched smile. He slowly walked to the door and took out a large ingot of gold. He threw it to the smiling shopkeeper and waved his hand. Continue your business. I won't disturb you anymore. Chapter 578. But the shopkeeper was in a hurry to flatter Yu Qianqiu and refused to take money. What a joke. He was flattering a person who was more important than the princess. How could he accept money? If he could form a relationship with such a person, it would be more valuable than this ingot of gold. Yu Qianqiu glared at him coldly. The shopkeeper suddenly felt a chill and shivered in fear. He didn't dare to pester him anymore and watched the distinguished guest disappear into the street. Walking to a secluded alley and seeing no one around, Yu Qianqiu flashed into the air. After identifying the direction, he flew to the Lan City branch of the World Chamber of Commerce. The reason why he came to Lan City of Baiwan country was to find a chance to see Wen Lanfeng and see what this guy who supported him meant. He didn't want to be sold out without knowing. He didn't expect to meet Nongzhu in advance. He was relieved to know that Wen Lanfeng didn't have any bad intentions. The problem he had to solve now was Yan Zhuixing. Since he met him, he had to take the opportunity to eliminate this guy to avoid future trouble. If he was Yan Zhuixing, he would definitely kill Guan Zhongkai and Yulan to silence them. After all, the odds of winning against 2 with 4 in the final stage of the tribulation passing stage was very high. Plus, there was a strange guy like Yan Zhuixing, so the other party would definitely ambush on the way to the Lan City branch. Yu Qianqiu made up his mind. If Guan Zhongkai and Yulan were in danger, he would definitely think of a way to save them and let them spread the news, just as he expected. In a wilderness on the outskirts of Lan City, Man Hu and the others were discussing how to split into 2 groups to intercept and kill Guan Zhongkai and Yulan. But what made them depressed was that everyone thought that Guan Zhongkai would go to the Lan City branch of the World Chamber of Commerce to report. But what about Yulan? Where was the contact point of the Circus Kingdom? Where could they intercept and kill Yulan? There were only a few of them. They couldn't just scatter and search everywhere, right? As for Wen Qing, who had the mind to care about her now, they had already dumped her. Damn it! Why did we miss this? What's the point of just killing Guan Zhongkai? The rest of Yulan can still spread the news. The 7th brother stomped his feet in frustration. 5th brother looked at Man Hu and said, Eldest brother, what do you think we should do? Man Hu snorted coldly and said, The Redbud Kingdom isn't far from the snowy mountains. Now that things had come to this, he had no choice but to contact his master and ask him to personally take action. He asked the old man to immediately rush to the Purple Thistle Kingdom and kill Shangguan Taiping and the others before they spread the news. He believed that with his master's cultivation, killing Shangguan Taiping would not be a problem. In this way, even if they get the news, dead people won't reveal secrets. Lao Wu clapped his hands and agreed. That's right. Let's kill Shangguan Taiping and his men. I'm sure Yulandu won't know about it for a while, so he won't spread the news. We'll definitely be able to find him easily.
It's settled then.
5th brother, 6th brother, go find Yulandu immediately. I'll send a message to Master first and then I'll go to the Orchid City branch with 7th brother. The World Commerce doesn't have any experts here, and Guan Zhongkai isn't my match. The 2 of us are enough to wipe out the Orchid City branch. Man Hu waved his hand and said, Let's split up. Just as Lao Wu and Lao Lu were about to leave, they heard Yan Zhuixing, who had been frowning and pondering, shout, Wait. The 4 martial brothers all paused, and Man Hu asked doubtfully, Young Palace Master, this matter shouldn't be delayed. What else do you have to say? Yan Zhuixing shook his head and sighed. Do you really think that Nyoyu just casually mentioned it and will really stay out of it? That's impossible. If I'm not mistaken, He purposely said those words for Guan Zhongkai and Yulan to hear. If he really wants to stay out of it, it's fine as long as he knows it. Why must he say it out loud? Maybe he really spilled the beans? This kind of thing isn't impossible, Lao Chi casually said. Man who raised his hand to signal him to shut up, frowned and said in a deep voice, "Young palace master is right." Niu Yud's last words are indeed fanning the flames. Young palace master? What do you mean? I have a feeling that Niu Yud is purposely targeting me. Yan Juexing's eyes stared coldly in the direction of Lan City, gritted his teeth and said, since he deliberately wants Guan Zhongkai and Yulan to spread the news, how can he let us kill the two of them so easily? If I'm not wrong, he will definitely obstruct us. With his cultivation, which one of us can stop him? Furthermore, if we make a move, it will make it even more obvious that we have ulterior motives, and it will prove that we want to silence them. At that time, we won't even have a chance to redeem ourselves. With all the countries fighting together, how can Senior Bing withstand the joint attack of a few experts? What a vicious plan. What is this Niu Yud trying to do? We have no enmity with him. Lao Wu let out a breath of cold air. Lao Chi weakly asked, do you guys think that master has some enmity with him? What's the point of saying this now? Man who glared at him, then turned back and said, young palace master, do you have an idea? It can't be considered an idea. We can only try it as a last resort. At least there's a chance to recover our losses. Yan Juexing quickly analyzed to the others, the only thing we need to do now is to immediately send a message to Senior Bing, so that he can be prepared. We have to return to Snowy Mountain as soon as possible before the news spreads. Otherwise, it won't be safe to stay anywhere. Once we have a foothold, we can accuse Niu Yud of spouting nonsense. After all, Niu Yud is a big liar, and everyone in the cultivation world knows that. In terms of credibility, we are better than him. In the end, it will depend on whose words are more trustworthy. This is our only chance. The others nodded slightly. Man who clapped his hands and said, all right, it's decided. You guys bring young palace master and hurry on with the journey. After I send the message to master, I will immediately rush over. There's no time to lose, let's go. In the blink of an eye, the four of them quickly flew into the sky. Man who was alone in the wilderness. He took out a handful of spirit stones, found the direction of Snowy Mountain, and used his unique voice transmission secret technique to send a message. Yu Qianqiu flew along the route from Lan City to the World Commerce Association's branch. Along the way, he didn't even see any signs of fighting, let alone hear any sounds of fighting. The Lan City branch was just ahead, so why wasn't there any reaction? Yu Qianqiu floated in the air, pinched his chin, and muttered to himself, strange, could it be that I made a mistake in my judgment? Or could Yan Juexing and the others bear the consequences of this news spreading? It can't be that awesome, right? Logically speaking, the World Commerce Association is the most powerful and has the widest channels to spread the news. The first person they would kill should be Guan Zhongkai. Just as he was about to go to the Lan City branch to see if Guan Zhongkai was there, he heard someone shouting, Senior Niu, why are you here? Yu Qianqiu tilted his head and saw Guan Zhongkai and Yulan coming together, followed by more than 10 people. The group of people gathered in the air and bowed to him. Senior Niu. No need to stand on ceremony. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand, suppressing the doubts in his heart, and asked Guan Zhongkai, you've already sent the news back to the World Commerce Association's headquarters. Guan Zhongkai rubbed his palms excitedly and said, that's right, my master personally received the news. At the same time, my master also told this junior to thank Senior, saying that if it wasn't for Senior, we wouldn't have discovered such a major hidden danger. He was so excited because Sikong Ju praised him for doing well this time, saying that he would personally tell Grandmaster Yin Baikong. As for his previous mistakes, he wouldn't pursue it anymore, and his authority in the World Commerce Association was restored. What a joke. This authority wasn't simple. In terms of seniority, he was the number 4 person in the World Commerce Association. He was second only to his martial uncle Jing Yuankong. How could he not be happy? As a matter of fact, as soon as he regained his authority to mobilize manpower, He immediately mobilized the 15 experts of the branch here. Half of it was for Yulan to see, to tell him that he hadn't lost power in the World Commerce Association. The other half was to ensure Yulan's safety when he went to deliver the news. After all, he was also worried that Man Hu and the others would silence them. If an accident happened, with these people blocking, it would be enough for the two of them to escape. Haha, don't thank me. This matter has nothing to do with me. You guys go do what you need to do. Yu Qianqiu politely and humbly brushed these people off. Watching the group of people disappear into the distance, he still had a stomach full of doubts and felt that something was wrong. After that, he arrived at the Lan City branch. The manager here also recognized him and immediately received him warmly. Yu Qianqiu let the manager do what he needed to and didn't need to care about him. Sitting in the inner hall and waiting for Guan Zhongkai to return, he frowned and thought about what went wrong. It shouldn't be like this. World Commerce Association Headquarters, Cornucopia God of Wealth Peak. After Sikong Ju received the news from his disciple, he immediately went to the Hall of Wealth at the top of the God of Wealth Peak and quickly informed the seated Yin Baikong of the news.
What?
There's such a thing? Yin Baikong opened his eyes and stood up. He stared at his eldest disciple and shouted, "Are you sure that this news is true? It shouldn't be false." Zhongkai saw it with his own eyes and heard it with his own ears. Sikong Ju explained, "According to Zhongkai, Niuyid seems to know Nongzhu. After sending Nongzhu out of the restaurant, he accidentally saw Yan Juixing and asked him a few questions on the spot. Although Niuyid didn't take it seriously after asking, Zhongkai saw that Yan Juixing and the others became nervous and quickly left. Zhongkai felt that this was a serious matter and immediately returned to the Lan City branch to report this matter to me." Yin Baikong squinted his eyes and said, "You mean that Bing Qingzi's disciples know the secret?" This is only Zhongkai's judgment based on the situation on the spot. This is because he noticed that when Niuyid mentioned this matter, the expressions of Bing Qingzi's 4 disciples were obviously not right. Furthermore, it was Man Hu, the eldest disciple of Bing Qingzi, who first found an excuse to bring Yan Juixing away. Sikong Ju was speaking the truth. However, he didn't know that Guan Zhongkai had exaggerated the matter a lot in order to atone for his crimes. He even showed off his wisdom and martial prowess. Humph, Bing Qingzi, what the hell are you trying to do? Yin Baikong's expression turned sinister as he said in a deep voice, "When everyone decided to replace the Yan father and son, Bing Qingzi even came to persuade me and Hu Changshou to protect them. At that time, I felt that it was strange. They were just 2 insignificant people, and I couldn't figure it out.
I almost forgot about it.
Who would have thought that there was such a big secret? Bing Qingzi." Chapter 579. Sikong Ju sighed. Speaking of which, we really have to thank that Niuyid this time. If it wasn't for him seeing through us, we would still be in the dark. However, that Niuyid is really powerful. I wonder how high his cultivation is. Let's put Niuyid's matter aside. Who else knows about Yan Juixing? Yin Baikong asked. Shangguan Taiping's disciple. Yulandu he was also at the scene and saw some clues. Right now, Zhongkai is escorting him to deliver the news. Sikong Ju replied.
Fool.
Yin Baikong scolded and immediately made arrangements. Before the news spreads, immediately send an order to all the branches to search for Yan Juixing's whereabouts. We must find him before anyone else. You will personally oversee this matter. Once you find Yan Juixing, you must capture him alive. I want to see what kind of heaven-defying cultivation technique he's hiding. Sikong Ju was slightly startled. He immediately understood his master's meaning. He shouldn't have left Yulandu alive and let him deliver the news to Shangguan Taiping. How could such a heaven-defying cultivation technique fall into the hands of others? However, it was too late to regret now. A trace of regret flashed across Sikong Ju's face. He immediately cupped his hands and said, "I'll go arrange it now." Just as he turned around, he heard his master say with a gratified tone, Your muddle-headed disciple, Guan Zhongkai, has done a good job. When he returns, I'll personally see him." Sikong Ju turned around and declined. "Master is overpraising me. He made 2 mistakes previously, and this disciple has already thickened his face to protect him. This time, he's only atoning for his mistakes. How would I dare to let Master see him personally?" Sikong Ju didn't report Guan Zhongkai's 2 mistakes to his master. Although it was within his authority, he didn't think that he could hide it from his master. Since it was already mentioned, he naturally had to make it clear. He was very clear about his master Yin Baikong's character. These words of praise were actually a test. If he didn't know about Guan Zhongkai's mistakes, then he would be an idiot. Yin Baikong gave a non-committal N. Sikong Ju sneaked a glance and saw that his master's expression had eased up quite a bit. He was even more certain that his master was just testing him. His back was already drenched in cold sweat. Yin Baikong waved his hand at him, and Sikong Ju quickly descended the mountain. The origin of the Redbud Kingdom's name was because there was a sea of redbud flowers that covered an area of several hundred miles in the kingdom. The people in the country liked to climb high mountains to see the endless sea of Chinese redbud flowers. The red and green colors were pleasing to the eye. However, they could only watch from afar and were not allowed to enter. Even the nobles were the same. This forbidden area had existed for many years. Although the imperial court had given strict orders, it was still too vast. It was impossible to send people to guard it. Thus, there were often people who wanted to sneak in to see what was going on, but those who entered usually never returned. Gradually, although this gorgeous sea of redbud flowers was pleasing to the eye, it also seemed somewhat strange, and no one dared to trespass. In the depths of the sea of redbud flowers, in a place that was difficult for outsiders to see, there was actually a stretch of magnificent buildings. Inside the main building, the Grand Redbud Flower Palace, the mid-soul formation cultivator Shengguan Taiping had just received a message from his disciple, Yulan Du. After recovering from his shock, he was now pacing back and forth alone in the hall, constantly muttering the 3 words, Yin Baikong. Of course, he wanted to obtain the peerless magic art that could dominate the world. However, this news had already fallen into Yin Baikong's hands. Although he was the second to know, he knew that with the World Commerce Association interfering, this piece of meat would not belong to him. Presumably, the World Commerce Association had already taken action. What worried him the most was that the Great Snow Mountain where Bing Qingzi, who is currently ranked 3rd in the cultivation world, lived was not far from here. It was a neighboring country. If he interfered in this matter, Bing Qingzi might be the first to deal with him. This would not be fun. Although Bai Changchun has the ability to dominate the cultivation world, he has never had such great ambitions. Now that everyone is living in peace, this is good. If the likes of Yin Baikong were to have such strength, I'm afraid there would be no place for me to stand. I didn't expect Bing Qingzi to be such an ambitious person. Shengguan Taiping folded his arms and laughed to himself, muttering, "This matter must be known to the people of the world. Humph. Whoever wants to dominate the cultivation world has to ask the consent of the cultivators of the world." Finished speaking, he turned around and strode towards the rear hall. He had already made his decision. No matter how tempting this fruit was, he had to endure it. With his cultivation, there was no chance of him taking advantage of this opportunity. He had to spread this news as soon as possible, otherwise he might lose his life because of this news. Yin Baikong was not a good person. Man Hu and the others finally experienced the power of the World Commerce Association. Originally, with their cultivation, they would have reached the Great Snow Mountain in less than 3 days. However, after 3 days, they had only covered half of the distance. There was really no other way. Wherever there was a possibility of leading to the Great Snow Mountain, there were people from the World Commerce Association hiding everywhere. Along the way, they had already tried to be as low-key as possible. However, there were constantly people who disregarded their lives and forcefully obstructed them, as if they had received a death order. The 5 of them had already fought dozens of battles, killing at least 200 to 300 if not 400 to 500 enemies. Fortunately, with the cultivation of the 5 of them, They were able to grit their teeth and endure it, and nothing happened to them. Now that things had come to this, it was clear that the entire World Commerce Association had been mobilized. Once their whereabouts were exposed, there were more and more people intercepting them. The opponents' cultivation was also getting higher and higher. Among the people they encountered, the number of experts at the late tribulation passing stage was gradually increasing. This was not a good sign. In a dense forest, the 5 people were hiding. From their appearance, they seemed to be in a somewhat sorry state. Number 5, Number 6, and Number 7 stood in a triangle, vigilantly watching their surroundings. Yan Juexing, who was surrounded by the 3 of them, was sitting cross-legged. If one looked closely, they would discover that he was not actually sitting on the ground. He was still a few inches off the ground, floating up and down slightly with his eyes closed. 7 poisonous, snake-like black fiendish auras were swimming around his body. Within each black fiendish aura, there was a faintly discernible blood light flashing, appearing exceptionally strange. At the side, man whose expression was solemn as he carefully guarded Yan Juexing, like a personal bodyguard. In the past few days of battle, they had continuously killed several late tribulation passing stage experts. To others, it was not a big deal if they could kill him. But to Yan Juexing, who cultivated demonic arts, a late tribulation passing stage nascent soul was an excellent tonic. None of the nascent souls he had devoured before had such a high cultivation. Including the 6 late tribulation passing stage experts, Yan Juexing had already devoured the nascent souls of more than 10 tribulation passing stage experts in 2 days. Man Hu and the others were the first to see this bloody scene of devouring. They were somewhat shocked, but they were already numb to it and did not find it strange. But what was worse was that eating too much tonic was not a good thing. If it was any other time, they would naturally be eager. But at this critical moment when they were escaping, Yan Juexing suddenly discovered that it was time for his demonic eyes to make a breakthrough. The opening chapter of the demonic book said, "Follow one's nature and become a demon." Once the opportunity arrives, one will immediately become a demon. The general meaning was that cultivating the demonic book was about following one's nature. If there was an opportunity to make a breakthrough, one must seize it and not miss it. Once the opportunity was missed, it would be wasted. Yan Juexing naturally could not miss such a good opportunity. It should be known that every inch of progress in the demonic book would bring him unimaginable benefits. So, at this critical moment, he still decided to make a breakthrough. And Man Hu and the others had nothing to say. They could only do their best to help. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. A series of high-speed flying sounds swept past the top. The few of them immediately held their breaths. After the sounds faded, they saw Old 7, who was staring at the gaps between the leaves above, angrily say, "It's Ouyang Da's people from the Great Liao Nation." They also interfered. "This is expected. I have already contacted Master again and informed him of the situation. Master has already set off from the Great Snow Mountain to pick us up. Don't say too much and be careful," Man Hu said calmly. The other 3's faces were filled with joy. Master had personally made a move. They suddenly felt a lot more confident. With Master's cultivation, it would take at most half a day to get here. On the first day, everyone only met people from the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce. They did not see any other forces interfering. The few of them thought that Yin Baikong wanted to monopolize the demonic book and purposely controlled the spread of the news. This was a good thing for them, who were escaping. After all, no matter how big the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce was, it was still limited. However, before the second day arrived, they discovered that outstanding heroes were everywhere. There were people flying everywhere to search for them, forcing them to hide in all directions. If Yu Qianqiu knew about this, he would definitely laugh very happily. Back then, he was forced into the misty forest by people like this. Now that he could let Yan Juexing have a taste of this, how could he not be happy? The 7 black fiends that were circling around Yan Juexing suddenly moved faster. The 4 of them looked over and saw Yan Juexing's chest suddenly expand. He took a deep breath and the 7 black fiends entered his nostrils in a blink of an eye. Then, his eyes moved slightly. Just as he opened his eyes, they saw a red glow that seemed to be overflowing. When he opened his eyes, the red glow overflowed and completely covered his eyes. Man, Hu, and the other three stared at his eyes and felt like their souls were captivated. They felt like they couldn't control themselves. Just as the four of them were shocked, the red glow quickly disappeared. Yan Juixing's eyes had already returned to normal. They were still pitch black. The four of them also calmed their minds in an instant. However, they still looked at each other with lingering fear. Man Hu asked softly, "Young palace master, have you already broken through?" "I have already cultivated to the realm of demon eye ecstasy," Yan Juixing said with a cold expression. The few of them revealed expressions of joy. They did not find his cold reaction strange at all. This was because every time he cultivated, he would have this reaction. Everyone was already used to it. Unbeknownst to them, when Yan Juixing's demon eye was shining with red light, there was an early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator hovering in the sky. As he scanned the dense forest, he suddenly discovered a red light flashing through the gaps in the forest. It immediately aroused his vigilance, and he stealthily came over here. Chapter 580. At this time, Yu Qianqiu had already left Lan City with Guan Zhongkai and Yulan. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan had both made great contributions and received praise from their master. They were naturally in a good mood and were even more respectful towards Niu Yud. But what made the two more depressed was that this Niu Yud was still half dead on the road. He clearly had such a high level of cultivation, but he refused to speed up. Instead, he continued to fly on a broken flying sword. What was worse was that he kept stopping along the way. It was no different from a sightseeing tour. So Guan Zhongkai said weakly, "Senior Niu, if we keep going like this, I'm afraid we won't be able to reach the World Chamber of Commerce by the time the cornucopia gathering starts." Unexpectedly, Niu Yud raised his eyebrows and said, "What? You think I'm flying too slow? If I fly too fast and you lose me, and I can't find the way to the World Chamber of Commerce, don't blame me for not keeping my word after taking the money." Yulan secretly smiled. He didn't care. He actually wanted Niu Yud to slow down. It was best if he didn't go to the World Chamber of Commerce. No, I was wrong. Guan Zhongkai hurriedly blocked in front of him and smiled apologetically. Walk slowly, no rush, no rush. If he really lost Niu Yud, the consequences were not something he could bear. If he was slow, then so be it. At least he could push the blame onto Niu Yud when it was late. It had nothing to do with him. Humph. Niu Yud gave him an unhappy look. Actually, it wasn't that he didn't want to fly fast, but his cultivation was only so high. No matter how fast he went, he couldn't go very fast. In the end, because of these few words, fine. This Niu Yud simply had Yulan by 3 horses and rode them slowly on the ground. He could walk dozens of li in a day. Yulan was naturally happy to cooperate. Guan Zhongkai was about to cry. He was just short of calling him ancestor. I told you to slow down, but not this slow method. How long would it take to reach the World Chamber of Commerce? If he was this slow, it would be strange if he was fine. He would definitely be taught a lesson when he returned. So Guan Zhongkai tried to persuade him with kind words, but Niu Yud only said that he was tired of flying and didn't want to fly anymore. In the end, the former begged for a long time before agreeing to his method of using a flying artifact. Sitting on the flying Dharma artifact, Yu Qianqiu was carefree, but he did not stop. Every once in a while, he would force the two of them to inquire about Yan Juixing to see if he had been captured. Fortunately, this was not a difficult matter for Guan Zhongkai. With the World Chamber of Commerce's information network in various countries, it was very easy for him to obtain the latest news. In this large area of space, there was a person observing every 1 kilometer because Yan Juixing and the other 4 had disappeared within this area.
He was just one of them.
However, coincidentally, Yan Juixing and the others who were being apprehended were right below him. He did not know if this was his opportunity to render meritorious service or his misfortune. A sky-shaking sound arrow was quietly held in his hand. If there really was a target down there, he wouldn't need to risk his life. As long as he sent a signal, he would have made a great contribution. After that, a large number of experts would gather here. If he captured Yan Juexing, his contribution would be even greater. Silently and gently, he approached the dense forest below. However, the vegetation in this forest was really dense. He had already reached the treetops, but he couldn't see the scene below clearly. He stretched his head left and right, trying to see what was happening below through the gaps between the branches and leaves without alerting his target. However, he was in the light, and the area covered by the towering trees was very dark. This was how people's visual reaction was. It was difficult to see anything in the dark from the light, but it was very clear from the light from the dark. He had clearly seen a red light flash before, and he was definitely not seeing things. However, there was no movement at all now. Without a choice, he tightened his grip on the sky-shaking sound arrow in his hand, ready to send a signal at any time. His body tried to avoid rubbing against the branches and leaves as he slowly descended. Although the movement from touching the branches and leaves was very small, what were the cultivations of Man Hu and the others? They were much taller than him, and in addition, they were constantly on guard, so they immediately sensed the faint movement. The four of them looked up at the top of Yan Juexing's head at the same time. Yan Juexing's cultivation was not as good as the four of them, so he did not notice anything at first. However, the four of them's actions undoubtedly indicated something. He slowly raised his head and looked up. The light from the branches and leaves was flickering, and he could vaguely see a person diving down. The seventh brother had a fierce expression as he prepared to kill him. Man Hu quickly signaled his three juniors to not act blindly without thinking and transmitted his voice. Everyone hide well. He has a whistling arrow in his hand. Wait for him to come down before making a move. Don't give him a chance to send a signal. The four of them quietly hid behind a big tree, ready to launch a sneak attack. However, they discovered that Yan Juexing slowly stood up in the air and did not have the slightest intention of hiding. Man Hu anxiously transmitted his voice. Young Palace Master, don't beat the grass and alert the snake. Don't worry, I just wanted to test the power of the demon eye ecstasy. Yan Juexing raised his head and looked up, just in time. Just as he finished speaking, his eyes suddenly blossomed with a demonic red light. The cultivator who had dived down had mixed into the shade of the trees and had gradually adapted to the darkness below. Stealthily pushing aside the last eyesore in front of him, he focused his gaze and looked down. What surprised him was that there seemed to be someone looking at him from below. From the light that leaked out, he could see the glimmer in the other party's eyes. In that instant, the pair of ice-cold eyes suddenly glowed with a demonic and breathtaking red light. It reflected directly into his eyes, and then he couldn't see anything. Only his eyes were filled with red. His consciousness instantly fell into a coma, and when he suddenly woke up, he discovered that he was in a boundless sea of blood. Panic, fear, and he wanted to shout loudly, and he wanted to struggle with all his might. However, he discovered that he could not shout, and his limbs were so heavy that he could not even move a finger. At this moment, a light suddenly appeared in the distant sea of blood, and it seemed to be an escape route. Come over, come over, come over. In the direction of the exit, there were people constantly calling out to him, and then he involuntarily floated over. Man Hu and the other three stared nervously in this direction. Once the other party sent out a signal, the consequences would be unimaginable. It was not like before. At that time, it was only the World Commerce Association that was chasing, but now, all the powers had come to join in the fun. Yan Juexing's demonic eye activated, and when the red light lit up, the four of them felt their minds ripple. Fortunately, it was not targeted at the four of them, so it did not affect them much. Yan Juexing stretched out his hand towards the person hiding behind the tree and softly called out, "Come over." The voice was like a sleep-talking murmur, like a mother calling her naughty son home for dinner, harmless and warm. As for the person behind the tree, he pushed aside the tree branches and slowly floated towards Yan Juexing with a dazed look in his eyes. He was still holding the sky-shaking sound arrow in his hand, but it did not have any effect. Instead, he stiffly loosened his fingers, and the arrow fell onto the thick layer of leaves. The red light in Yan Juexing's eyes had already disappeared, and his eyes had turned into an abnormally terrifying blood-red color. It made one's scalp tingle, and it did not look like a human's eyes. That cultivator quietly floated in front of Yan Juexing, and with a silly smile, he stared at that pair of blood-red eyes. Yan Juexing stretched out his hand and gently stroked his face. His movements were very gentle. Just as the smile on that cultivator's face grew wider, the blood red in Yan Juexing's eyes faded, and he regained his cold and emotionless look. That cultivator immediately became confused, as if he could not find his way. Man Hu and the other three were no longer affected when Yan Juexing withdrew the red light in his eyes. But they still stared dumbfoundedly at this abnormally strange scene. Suddenly, Yan Juexing's hand that was caressing the other party changed from gentle to sinister 5 claws. With a lingering killing intent, it pierced into the lower half of the other party's face with a crack. From the nose to the entire chin, it was completely wrapped in this claw. Fresh blood flowed out uncontrollably. That cultivator felt the pain, and his eyes instantly regained clarity. Then, they bulged out, filled with disbelief. Struggle, but with half of his face being grabbed, how could he struggle free? The more he struggled, the more pain he felt. He could not even make a sound of pain or cry for help. His nose and mouth were grabbed by the other party, so how could he make a sound? Gotcha! Half of his face was crushed together, and a bloody hole appeared on the lower half of his face. The breath exhaled from the bloody hole blew out a blood bubble, and with a pew, it burst. That person almost fainted from the pain and lost control of his body. Just as he was about to fall, Yan Juexing expressionlessly clenched his 5 claws into a fist and lightly shouted, "Little devil fist." A fist imprinted on the other party's chest. Bang! The sound was not too loud, and it was only a muffled sound. Obviously, the strength was controlled perfectly. However, that cultivator exploded into pieces in an instant, and blood rained down on the ground. Yan Juexing, who was floating in the forest, expressionlessly shook off the blood on his hand. The strange thing was that his hand did not seem to be stained with blood. He just shook it, and there was not even a trace of blood on his hand. He glanced at the direction where the 4 of them were hiding, and as if nothing had happened, he said, "State Preceptor, let us continue on our way." The 4 of them walked out silently and looked at the scattered red on the ground. They were still in a daze. They did not expect the devil eye to be so powerful, to be able to directly control people. It was a little too scary. First it was the devil eye, then the devil claw, and finally the little devil fist, which easily solved the problem. The 4 of them thought back to that scene. If it was used on them, they did not know if they could block it. Just thinking about it made them feel a chill down their spines. OL 6 picked up the sky-shaking arrow and put it in his storage bag. Man Hu laughed bitterly and waved his hand. "Let's go. Fly close to the ground in the forest. Although the speed is much slower, at least it is safer. I hope I can meet Master soon." After saying that, he identified the direction and flew away. The 4 of them followed closely behind him. The 5 of them fluttered in the forest, avoiding the trees in front of them. Looking at Yan Juexing's flying speed, he was actually not any slower than them, but there was a layer of black light wrapped around his body. This was the flying movement technique from the demonic book, Devil Light Glimpse. Otherwise, with his cultivation, there would be a big gap if he wanted to keep up with the speed of the 4 of them. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.